Fabulous. So I just want to welcome everybody firstly to this event. Really pleased that so many of you are able to join us. Before I move from housekeeping, I just wanted to mention that you need to keep your audios now switched to silent. So everybody who's got their audio on at the moment, please switch it off. Auntie Joyce, I'm going to mute you, so you may need to unmute later. Thank you. And then I'm just checking that everybody else. Uncle Stanley, I'm going to mute you as well, if you don't mind, just for now. Yep. Done. Who else? I think everybody should be fine. But yeah, just to say, as far as the program goes, please just put your comments or questions or any thoughts you have in the chat section. We'll have the Q&A and comments and everything at the end of the program. Again, a reminder to make sure that your name is visible on the screen, because if I can't identify you, I'll put you into the meeting room. Of course, most of you will know, I think by now, that my name's Juanita Cox, and I'm one of the co-founders, along with Rod Westmus, my husband, of Guyana Speaks. And we just wanted to start off, first of all, by recognizing that today is the birthday of Uncle Eric Huntley. Eric Huntley, as most of you will know, together with his wife, Jessica Huntley, we're hugely indebted to them for both of the pioneering activities that they've conducted over the years that they've been based here in the UK. And also, you know, the way they've actually transformed the community around them through community and social justice activism, but also through their commitment to publishing. So we just wanted to recognize Uncle Eric's birthday and just wish him all the best. Unfortunately, he can't join us, or fortunately, because he's celebrating, of course, with his family. And then I just wanted to make a brief comment about next month's program, which is obviously Sunday, the 30th of October at 3:30. We've started doing our programs a bit later. I think we normally used to do it at 2, and then it kind of kept shifting, but it's just to make it easier for people in different time zones. So it's always the last Sunday of the month at 3:30. We have had a summer break, and we have spent some time in Guyana and had a really wonderful time. So Rod will be feeding back to you shortly. But just to say, for next month's Guyana Speaks, we're going to be talking about varied themes that are going to include things like the contribution of Guyanese to the NHS here in the UK. But we also noted that this year, of course, would have been Walter Rodney's 80th year. And we just wanted to mark that by inviting Cecil Gutsmore to talk to us about the importance of Walter Rodney. And actually, on that point, I wonder if I could bring in Nigel Hinds. Nigel, if you're there, Nigel's visiting from, I don't know whether it's Guyana or from Miami, Nigel. Can you unmute? Nigel, you're still on mute at the moment. Yeah, now,
yes.
Perfect. So given that I've just mentioned Walter Rodney, and I know that you're visiting the UK at the moment, are you visiting from Guyana or from Miami?
Well, I actually came across from Miami, but I'm primarily based in Guyana.
Okay.
I'm in Guyana about 9 months for the year, and you know that's my and 3 months in, well, abroad, but primarily in Miami.
Okay, okay. Do you want to maybe give us a quick 1-minute background so that everybody here knows, you know, what you do in Guyana?
Well, in Guyana, I'm primarily run accounting auditing firm. So I'm in the financial sector, which I've been in for over 20 years. The last elections, I was, you know, we co-joined the party with Robert Badal, Change Guyana. I've always been a fan of Walter Rodney, as we may have discussed. He actually Used to drop me to school a few times when we came out for the minibus on Aubrey Barker Road, because he lived right at the corner of Aubrey Barker and Greenheart Street. I knew his son Shaka. And, from just reading his books, one of the first historical books I read was his Groundings with My Brother, not Groundings with My Brothers, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And it has played a huge influence in my life. But pretty much I'm a businessman slash politician slash social activist. And, my goal
Slash
in life
slash
is to
slash poet. so
Well,
so
this is yeah, I did a couple poetry I love since I was young, but I kind of fell off the wagon on that in terms of writing. But I love reading poetry, and well, if you recognize me as a poet, I'm flattered.
well, I liked the short piece that you wrote on Walter, and I wondered if you could just share it with the audience before the program officially starts.
Okay. Well, this is a tribute to Walter Rodney, our brother, for his 80th birth year. Walter Rodney, our brother, where reason failed, time has shown your wisdom. We salute you, great brother. Unselfishness was your creed. You give with love to Guyana and the world. Your gift of life inspires us always. They say time stands still, yet our memory of your courage lives on. You are the touchstone for bravery. You fought unflinchingly and heroically. In Virgil's words, you march with a spirited step, heart abounding in courage. Time flies and cannot be restored. Yet you will always be with us. You spoke words akin to freedom, such as anti-exploitation, anti-racism, class solidarity, anti-poverty. Borrowing from Jean-Paul Sartre exposition, who said, I believe this man was not only an intellectual, but the most perfect man of our time. Indeed, you grounded with your brothers and sisters from all walks of life. Courage, undefeatable, unencumbered by fear, with a mind freed from being unprincipled or unnecessarily compromising. As Seneca noted, the touchstone of a brave mind resolves to live and die free. You united the working class, the poor, and the downtrodden. As we honor your deeds by our words, actions, and results, you live with us and among us always. Your life works are forever our joy. Memories of your courage exemplify the touchstone for being Guyanese. Hearts beating bravely, always.
Thank you so much for that, Nigel. Nigel, I know that you're planning on going to Speaker's Corner this afternoon. So if anybody's in the vicinity and they want to see you, they'll find you there. But please feel free to stay on and join us for the rest of the program. Otherwise, Rod and I'll be in touch before you go.
Okay, I will. Well, I actually will probably stay for the beginning, but
okay.
You know how I don't know to what time things happen at the Speaker's Corner. So
yeah, they will have started. They will already have started. But,
yes, and they probably will finish around 6 or 7.
Yeah, I think so.
It's actually much earlier.
It's normally in the early afternoon. But Nigel, thank you so much. We really appreciate that contribution. I just want Rod, can you come in now? I wondered if you could say something about the plans for May that you have.
Well, Juanita and I returned about 3 weeks ago. Yes, from a wonderful holiday. We went to Costa Rica as well as Guyana, and we visited places that we hadn't been to before, namely Matthews Ridge, Port Kaituma. We went into Buxton, like we've never been before. Mahaika, Luzignan, Coven John. But what we wanted to do on this trip, which we pretty much achieved, was to discover parts of Guyana that we hadn't seen before. So getting back to London, we thought about it and said, you know, there's so much others would love to see in Guyana. Let's organize a group. I contacted the tour operator who actually helped us with our expedition in Guyana, and he has assisted in putting together a wonderful program. Don't have too many details right now, but the dates that we are looking to have a group which we're loosely calling the Best of Guyana Tour 2023 would be from the 22nd of May through to the 8th of June. And some places that we're looking to go to, it would be Kaieteur and the Oranduke Falls, Fort Island and Essequibo River, Iroquois and the Canopy Walkway. Really discover Georgetown, its structures, its architecture and its gardens, Mahaika River and the Kanji pheasant and Rupununi savannas. We will be traveling via British Airways, and it will be a direct flight. When I say direct, yes, they will stop in St. Lucia, but that's just to refuel and take offload passengers, I believe. But it's the same aircraft that will take you from Gatwick Airport directly into Chedijagan International. So that is just a little summary of what we have planned. If there are individuals that are interested in going, please let us know in the chat. And as details start to solidify, we will let you know. There you go.
Thank you, Rod. Okay, so now something exciting, or at least I think it's exciting. I'm just gonna play a short. Sorry, I'm gonna play a short video. If I can find it. Let's see. Hang on a second. Can you all see it?
Yeah.
Change the screen. Okay. So that there's an introduction to the Silk Cotton comic series that's being written by Colleen Douglas. Just to give you a bio, Colleen Douglas is, of course, a daughter of Guyana and a comic writer who currently resides in Notting Hill. Her narrative and creative tastes are eclectic, and having grown up in a multi-ethnic country rich in folkloric traditions that include such characters as Old Higue, Bacco, Massacuraman, she's developed a love for all things supernatural, natural, esoteric, and weird. She loves old comics and mystery buildings and listens to rock, metal, and opera, which she writes when she writes fight scenes. Colleen has published her comic Titan with Amigo Comics. She was later named editor-in-chief for Amigo Comics and edited for Sally Books, which is based in Malaga. She also edits for Scout Comics. She has written various, you'll have seen like Apocalypse Skull, Gargantuan, various other comics. And her current book, Silk Cotton, is with Leviathan Labs and is due out in October 2022. Her work is influenced by her love of weird fiction, comics from the UK, and an intense love of the comic adventures of the classic Marvel character, the Silver Surfer. I just actually wanted to congratulate Colleen, because she recently was awarded a PhD in ancient monetary systems and is a numismatist. I was trying to remember how to pronounce the word, but specializing in Byzantine coins and Ottoman banknotes. So yeah, a very unusual PhD to do. And while I'm on it, I'm actually going to see if I can share the screen again, because I just want to show you some of the characters while Colleen is talking. Some of the characters that she's going to be talking to us about. So let me see if I've got it there. Hang on, I didn't want that one. I'm also just going to try and spotlight Colleen for you while we're here. Spotlight for everyone. There we go. And share screen as well. See how well this works. Oh, maybe it doesn't. Hold on. Oh, that's strange. I can't get it to go full screen. Ah, doesn't want to work. All sorts of strange things going on my screen. How about that?
Yeah.
Did that work? We got there in the end. Wonderful. Colleen, I don't know if you would like me to do this. I kind of went through and looked at all the different
I thought you might love to do that, actually.
Yes. And I particularly because I love the way that you've reinterpreted the Guyanese kind of characters, folkloric characters, but I love this particular section here, because you kind of explain what's going on. In the two characters are talking, and then it says you're gonna frighten all the jumbies away with your dress sense. And then the other character's like, since when Jumbie got style? And then of course, so because we ancient, you think we don't do fashion. And I just love that, because I love the way it brings it then into the future. So I thought I'd particularly share that, but I'm going to hand over to you so that you could talk to us about what you've produced.
Okay. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you may be. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Jumbies. Okay. Basically, I started off with the idea that Guyana has a lot of rich folklore, and we've never really utilized it as much as we should. And it's almost to the point where we don't embrace it as other cultures have embraced theirs. You know, the Greeks, we've got Thor and Loki and Norse mythology, and we have Obatala and Ogun and Oshun and Shango, and these are Orisha from, you know, West Africa. And you kind of get a feeling that Guyana has this rich wealth of storytelling, you know, in its underbelly. And we've all grown up with it. And we've all heard the stories, and we've all been told lots and lots of different things. But we've never really sort of kept it to the forefront of our minds. You know, it's not something that appears in popular culture for us. You know, the Japanese have got manga, for example, that's in everything. But for us as Guyanese, I think that even though we all know of the stories, we don't really do much more than that. And for me, in the folklore of Guyana, the Jumbie is like the ultimate mythological spirit. You know, it stands above the rest, and it can cover a wide range of spiritual beings. And all the races of Guyana tend to believe in some form of this frightful spirit, you know, despite their religious tendencies. And they also have this, there's also the belief coming from practitioners, for example, of Obia, which is an ancient sort of African rooted form of witchcraft. And people simply don't utilize any of that, Like, for example, if you're in Guyana, when I was a kid growing up, one of the favorite expressions of Guyanese when they say goodbye at night is, "Don't let John behold you." And many Guyanese have the stories, and they've been told it for years. Anything from seeing it by the roadside, taking a second look and nothing is there, and especially going past a cemetery was particularly frightening. And then children like me, for example, who were brought up on scary stories, kind of have it as this whole wealth of imagination sitting there. And to put it into perspective, is television had not made its entry into Guyana until like the 1980s, and so storytelling was a requirement. And I remember the early stories told by my grandmother and my aunt and my neighbors and friends and even random strangers. And they all carried like a single commonality. And that is the power that a story can impart. There's nothing more exciting than a good, intriguing zombie story at night, while you're listening to like your older relative leading up to the story's scary conclusion, which is the best part, of the zombie choking or breaking necks and all of that. And it was enough to scare you and make you run under your blanket, right? And to me, it was this really special and otherworldly and very unique kind of way of telling stories. And you'd have people from different communities telling you things, like families from the riverine communities. They understood how scary a zombie story can be at night, because in those areas, an oil lamp or torchlight was not enough to sort of illuminate the blackness, of the night. And then you can go through lots of different kinds of storytelling depending on who was telling it. For example, my grandmother had this manner of telling you stories with heights of imaginary grandeur, and then you get the depths of realism and moral code, because storytelling was the vehicle for conveying kernels of wisdom and warnings about the world. As I grew older and I became exposed to books, storytelling took on a new form. Like, as a preteen, I was introduced to Nancy stories. And I remember things like a Nancy's Old Riding Horse and a Nancy and Snake the Postman, But for me, the one that kind of informed my mind and the impetus for Silk Cotton, that was the dispersal of wisdom. Oral tradition in Guyana, in my mind, it's not limited to Anansi stories, right? There we have our own supernatural beings ranging from the native ancestry of first people of Guyana, Amerindians, to those brought with other nations that make up the diverse Guyanese diaspora, all with an abundant wealth of heritage and meaning. My personal goal with Silk Cotton is to bring these supernaturals to the fore. As I said, I've seen Norse and Greek and Roman and African mythology upheld and valued. It seemed to me that Guyana, with its wealth of local mythology, did not only overlook a core foundational element in its society, but that the myths had extended out to the rest of the Caribbean. There, supernaturals had graduated from local folklores to international jumbies because they'd crossed borders. To that end, I decided to create a mythological pantheon of Caribbean supernaturals. I think it is important to remember the stories in oral tradition because they are more than just tales. They inform and reinforce identity. For me, Kanaima, Masakuraman, and Mongeza are more than jumbies. They serve to remind me of my Guyanese heritage and identity. In telling the story of silk cotton, I hope to add my voice, long-held wealth of oral tradition for future generations. And part of that is rendering a new interpretation for both Guyanese and Caribbean supernaturals as a whole. No matter how old you become or the changing times, the stories of the Jumbi, it will live on in Guyanese minds, at least. To that end, welcome to Silk Cotton. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, Colleen. Really, really pleased. So excited for you. Can you just tell us, where's the comic going to be available? I mean, where are we to find it?
The comic will come out first at Luca, which is a very large, I can say it's like a Comic-Con, but it's more than that. It's sort of all about books as well as comics, as well as graphic novels. It's anything in sort of the written form, really, in expression. And that will be taking place in Italy, and that will be at the end of October. And then Silk Cotton will be making its way to different languages after that, which I should think that will be happening in 2023. So once I'm given the schedule, I will be posting it up on my social media platforms, and my website, which you can easily access, and you would be able to find the details there. So yes.
Okay, so
it's coming to haunt you.
It's coming to haunt us. We can't wait. I wanted to ask you, because we've got about maybe 10 minutes in which we can have a little chat, and I wondered just what was the influence of I know there's comic or people who draw comics, comic writers like Harold Bascom, I think Barrington Brathwaite probably.
Yes, Barrington Brathwaite is one of the first people that influenced me for comics.
Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to know, like who actually influenced you.
Yes, because I was first, I think I was super excited because to me, I'd never met a Guyanese who was doing what he was creating at the time. And he was creating lots of different sort of comics about, sometimes it could be political satire, or even it can be like strips in newspapers and all of that. But the thing that stood out for me was that a few years ago at the Guyana High Commission, I received a couple of his comic books, and it was called Shadow of the Jaguar. And I fell in love with that so much. And I was really miserable because I could never find it again. And on top of that, he'd sort of done it as a 3-part story, and I only had the first 2. I was so disappointed that I could never find out what the part 3 was. But yeah, it starts really with him. I mean, it isn't just, Marvel and DC and whatever. It was what was coming out of your own backyard. When I was growing up, there used to be a bookshop on Camp Street, and I can't remember what it was called, but when I went in there for normal academic books, there used to be a black and white sort of, I don't know, A5 size comic that was, and I don't remember who did it, but it was Betty and Joe, and they had all these little children in steps.
Right.
And I used to love reading that, because that was quite fun for me. And it had no color. It was simply black and white, and that was like some of the first Guyanese comics that I ever encountered, and I really fell in love with them from there. And then it sort of stayed with me, and it became sort of a natural extension from writing prose to writing. I was always a visual writer, so it kind of just naturally graduated to writing comics. And yeah, it's been there ever since and has never left.
and so, because bearing in mind that you've been here in the UK for a long while, where have you kind of had all this refreshed in your mind? I remember when you were kind of going through the process of writing this, I think you asked for some comics. I think it was Gordon Stewart probably sent you some.
Yes, yes, it was. I did ask, and Gordon got in touch. He did have some of Barrington's comics, but he didn't have the sort of fantasy ones that I was looking for. He had more sort of the political satire ones, and that was a different sort of sphere. And but yeah, he was very helpful in that, actually. So that was very nice of him. I did get in touch with Barrington, and he said that his work was really not available outside of Guyana. And I think he only had a limited amount of work still to hand. And it either you would have to have someone in Guyana send you them, or you know, get them from him and then pass them on, because there wasn't like, he's not like available on Amazon, which would have been useful.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, he was not available there, so I couldn't really get any of his work or whatever might be his new work.
Yeah.
Which was a bit sad,
well,
but
I'm glad he's online anyway, so he's able to hear you.
Oh,
yeah,
good.
I saw him.
Hurry up and do an Amazon account.
you.
I want to buy your books.
So
Please.
yeah, no, I'm pleased he's here to hear it. And also Gordon Stewart's just logged in not too long ago. So
Okay.
but yeah,
Hello, Gordon.
I love the way that how the world is, and so many feed into the success of an individual, and we're all here rooting for you and really delighted. And I know Michelle Santa was also online, and I think Michelle is writing the introduction. Is that right?
Michelle wrote a very excellent foreword for the Silk Cotton book.
Fantastic.
And she was very kind about it, because you know, I sort of made her go back to her childhood traumas, which was not very nice, I'm sure. But she was very nice about it. So
yeah. Well, I love it. What I'm trying to work out is, how did you actually manage to sell the idea to whoever was going to publish it? Because I just thought it's so hard quite often to set something within a Guyanese context and then have people actually buy into the story.
Yes, I think it's because we right now are experiencing a kind of a renaissance. When I say that, I mean in terms of Black creative writing, and also that covers comics as well. And I think that now that the market is sort of open with manga having all these different types of genres, it's becoming more and more apparent to people that they have a choice outside of the traditional superhero, you know, and there are much more stories out there to sort of read and learn and know about. And also, it's a way sort of to make a stepping stone into a different culture that you've never experienced also. And I think that people are always motivated and are always interested and fascinated and even repulsed by things that they don't know anything about and they find uniquely strange. You know, because let's face it, Old Higue is not your everyday old lady, you know. So to explain that to someone that, you know, there's this being that you grew up hearing about who takes her skin off and becomes a ball of fire, and then she gets in through the keyholes in people's houses, and you know, all of that, it's it's a bit out there. But then to explain that an entire nation of people know these stories and have grown up with them and are even traumatized by them, because Guyanese parents, oh, they do not edit when they tell these things. They just go full on, and you have to live with the consequences of it. you know, like when they finish telling you the story, they close the light. And I used to live in Lodge, Juanita. They closed the light and they closed the door, and your school uniform was hanging behind the door, and it took on a totally different meaning in the dark.
That's so funny.
Yes.
And what I loved in the comic as well is that the Shirley has, you know, she's got her gun in one hand, but her pointer broom in the other.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes,
It just
absolutely.
is so evocative.
Yes, I modernized the Shirley when it came to dealing with Old Higue, because let's face it, nobody's throwing down any bags of rice and, you know, going and finding it. No. Nobody's wasting time with that. She has a gun. Of course, it's a supernatural weapon. And the cartridges are rice cartridges. So she just shoots you with them rather than actually throw, you know, rice around, whatever.
Fun, yeah.
No, it's a bit more modern. My aim with Silk Cotton, as I said, was reimagining the supernaturals. And also when I was doing research, looking at different supernaturals like Bacco and all of that, some of the renderings that I found were quite dated and partially ridiculous as well, because
so your Bacco presumably doesn't wait around for milk and bananas. What is your
no
Bacco
no
kind of
he's on the move. My Bacco is on the move, and he's you know, and he takes on a persona, meaning yes, he's still small in stature, but he just looks like a small man, you know, with a suit on, and you know, he's going about his business and whatever.
Covered in bling.
Yes, covered in bling. Absolutely, covered in bling. You know, because I believe that supernaturals could be living right next door to you, just like we have shiny vampires who are exceedingly modern, and you know, we've got, I don't know, Norse gods who live near fishing villages and whatever. I think that the same can be applied to Guyanese supernaturals. They could be living right next door to you in the house that's got running water and electricity and everything else. And it's only when they're ready to let you know who they are, that's the time you will see them. So, and I think that for the new generation, I wanted to preserve some of that oral tradition and storytelling, and to make a vehicle that was accessible to them, as well as people who have never met Guyanese supernaturals and are meeting them for the first time.
So now I feel like when the sun sets and it gets dark indoors, I'm gonna have to switch all the lights on, because goodness knows what's hiding in my bathroom or in the cupboard in the kitchen.
I distinctly remember you having a lizard in your bathroom and you were fine about it.
I'm fine with lizards. I'm fine with tarantulas. I'm not so fine with Massacuraman behind the back door. so that's that. But Colleen, thank you so much. And I hope when we do Border Bazaar this year, that
yes,
perhaps we will be able to have some copies of the comic for sale at the Border Bazaar.
Well, if you let me know when it is, I will try my best.
Okay, that's fantastic. Border Bazaar, for those who don't know, is will be in December at some point. I think generally in the first week, but of September. Sorry, I said September. December. But we'll send out the details about nearer the time. Meanwhile,
Yes.
Can we just put our hands together to thank Colleen Douglas? Amazing, so
Thank
exciting. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to remove the spotlight. Just very briefly, I wanted to bring in, John is hiding somewhere, John Y. Literally because he sent me, now let me just work out where it is. I think it's on this. He sent me a copy of a poem that he had written as part of, actually it's a Creole writers book. I put here Wordsworth McAndrew writers group, but it was a Creole writers book group. But John, if you're there, Betty, I can see you. Is John with you?
Yeah.
Any sign of John?
Hello.
Okay.
You gave me an instant double chin then. As I pulled back in horror and I saw my double chin. That's not a good look. I think if you've got both two computers on, it'll echo. Oh. Not a good sound.
Is that me making those noises?
It's you. Yes, I think you have two computers on at the
Devices.
same time. So
Two devices on.
it creates an echo. But I'm trying to see if I can find you. Rod, can you
Hello.
see if you can find John on your screen and then spotlight him for me?
Yeah, let's see if I can find him. Here he is.
Hello.
Yes, hi, John. We can hear you. We're just trying to spotlight you.
I just did it.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can now see
Hello?
you.
Yeah, we hear you.
We hear you,
If you
John.
can hear me.
We just
Juanita?
wondered if you could share with us your Dutchman poem.
Yeah, can you hear me? You can. Okay. Here.
And the only problem
You've
we've
got it up on
is
the
that
screen here.
Betty- I've got it up on the screen, but the problem we've got is that Betty's is on as well as yours.
I know, but they're interfering with me.
Turn it off. There we
I've
go.
never been interfered with like this before. Hold on. Can you? What's going on?
You've got a Bacco in your room.
Too many Y's here.
I tell you what, John, we'll come back to you once you've only got one device on. Otherwise,
Okay. Can you close that? There. How's that?
no, it's still echoing. Can I put you both on mute again? We're going to move on and then we'll come back to you a bit later on when you've only got one device on. Because you've got the other John Y and Betty. You've got two devices on, John.
I don't know why you did that. Turn the volume up again.
Are you okay, John? You're all right now, John. Shall I bring it up again?
Let me come and sit there.
Yes, need to come to this one. Exactly. I don't know why you come. Let Isabel help you.
I have to say, I take my hat off to the elders in the room for even trying, with Zoom. I know it's really, it's not easy to get your head around it. But where is?
No. Yeah, he's
Okay. I'm gonna move on because it's too painful on my ears. So we'll wait until they've worked that out. I'm gonna move now to Rosie McAndrew. So I'm gonna look for Rosie. If you see her before me, Rod.
Yeah, you want me spotlight?
Please do. There we go. Rosie, fantastic to have you. And
Thank you.
John and Betty, sorry for moving on, but we'll come back to you a bit later.
We've solved the problem now.
Don't worry, we'll come back to you, John.
Okay.
Okay, just put yourself on mute for the time being. And I just wanted to introduce Rosie. So we know many of you will be familiar with Rosie and know her personally. But for those who don't, Rosie worked as a translator and assistant film editor before settling down as a teacher and teacher training in Hastings. Having studied drama, film, radio, and TV, in her free time, she's done a lot of acting and directing for the local theatre, as well as taking up gardening and garden design, supporting anti-racist and peace groups, singing in community choirs, and pursuing a passion for Argentine tango. She has always enjoyed writing and has published 2 books so far. The first is Wordsworth's White Wife. The alliteration in that gets my tongue completely twisted. Wordsworth's White Wife, a memoir of her life in Guyana in the late 60s with the Guyanese folklorist, broadcaster and poet, Wordsworth McAndrew. She is currently working on a sequel to this memoir, with a working title of No One's Wife. It explores the story of her life back in England with her daughter and the joys and stresses of being a single mother. I just wanted to mention before we moved on, just to say that Wordsworth, of course, was born in Georgetown in 1936 to Winslow Alexander McAndrew and to Ivy McAndrew. He died on the 22nd of April 2008 in New Jersey, age 71. But he is, as all of you I'm sure will know, is remembered today as Guyana's leading folklorist, a poet and creative artist. And it's essentially through his work as a radio broadcaster during the 1960s and 1970s that he helped Guyanese recognize and feel proud of their mythological and folkloric heritage. So really this section of today's program provides us an opportunity to celebrate McAndrew's life, his sort of love of folklore and his creative output. And I think I just loved the combination of having Colleen's sort of past and present, I guess. So I think of Wordsworth as being there in the past, ensuring that the folklore is brought back into given high profile within Guyanese culture. And then, people like, Barrington Brathwaite doing an amazing job in terms of as a cartoonist and comic drawer, and people like Harold Bascom, but then now having Colleen Douglas reinterpreting all of it and creating something new for the new generation. So if we could all just welcome Rosie McAndrew. Thank you so much for being here, Rosie, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to start by showing a picture of Mac as I knew him. And this is a copy of a painting by John Krzyk. And I'll just hold that up because that is how I knew him. That is exactly what he was like. I don't know if that is.
Yeah, we can see that really clearly. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a painting, and I was very lucky to get a photo of it, which I was able to enlarge. So that is the Mac that I knew. We were married for about 5 years overall. Right, now I'm going to read what I've planned, because then I know that I'll cover what I want to cover. And there should be time at the end for questions if we need that. So my very first serious conversation with Wordsworth was about folklore. We were both doing courses at the BBC Training Centre. His was a radio follow-up to the 6-month course on television that he and other Guyanese broadcasters had done, sponsored by the British Council. Mine was to prepare me for my posting to broadcast to schools in Guyana, arranged by VSO, Voluntary Service Overseas. Our two groups were sharing a lounge for the week that our courses overlapped, and that's how I met him. On my course, my first assignment was to record an interview with someone. It didn't matter who with, it didn't matter what about, it just had to be recorded and hopefully of interest. I asked Mac if I could interview him. Far from scorning the idea, he seemed flattered and asked me what I wanted to ask him about. I knew nothing about Guyana, apart from its position in South America, and innocently thinking Mayans, Incas, and Aztecs, I said I'd like to hear about Guyanese culture. Little did I know that I could hardly have chosen a subject closer to his heart. For besides being a much-loved radio producer and presenter and an established poet, he was the authority on all things Guyanese, from the intricacies of Creolese to the songs, proverbs, festivals, and rituals of its folklore. And in our interview, he told me all about kwekwe, a buying of the bride ceremony with its origins in Africa. I didn't have to do much interviewing. The words just poured out. Words worked, in truth. This laid the seeds for a link between us. We met often during the week we were both at the BBC, and I invited him to my parents' home for a weekend, partly in anticipation of the hospitality I sensed I would receive in Guyana. He left England soon after, and when I arrived in Guyana some weeks later, I found that Mac had contrived for me to lodge with a Guyanese family instead of sharing a house with other VSOs. so I was spared the insulated social round of other expats. I had an entree into his world from the beginning. So much of the richness of my early experience of Guyana was due to him. He took me everywhere, he showed me everything. Among other arts, he was an expert on the steel pan and taught me to play his own soprano pan. In the process, I learnt lots of Guyanese folk songs, which I love. His many friends included several Calypsonians, notably El Cid, who was keen on folk music too. He lived in Alboys Town, and we would spend the evening in his little house in a backyard there, the three of us surrounded by his young children, singing folk songs, where I loved harmonizing to my favorites. Another of his Calypsonian friends was Sweet Oil, who oversaw my first attempts at Guyanese cooking. Wherever Mac went, he would take his tape recorder to record new folk songs or stories. And on the way anywhere, he would be hailed by a succession of greetings. Mac, wapnin man, long time me no see ya. Le we gyaf na man. So we were always late wherever we went, wherever we were supposed to be. If we weren't walking, we would be on his bicycle, with me perched on the carrier or the crossbar, and that is how he carried me to our wedding a year or so later. And once, when we moved house, I had to clasp his collection of treasured 78 records to my stomach as I leapt onto the carrier with the bike already set in motion. Woe betide me if I dropped them. What a responsibility. He instructed me in various culinary arts, folk drinks like sorrel, five-finger, cashew apple, morbi, and swank. He made crab soup with callaloo. We had guana, turtle, and curry hassa. I undertook pepper sauce, burning my hands, my feet, and my eyes in the process. At Christmas, I made black cake, garlic pork, and pepper pot. Later, his mother trained me to pick shrimp for cook-up rice, to grate coconut and strain it for the milk, to pound green plantain for fufu, to soak and fry saltfish to garnish metaji. I wanted to try everything. And one day, we were invited to visit some of his Amerindian friends in the bush, in a gorgeous open-sided wooden house in a tree by a creek, where their small children swam naked like little otters. The delicacy that day was to be the maggots of the 6 o'clock bee, a prospect that didn't appeal to me at all. And after watching them seething in a hot karahi, did us make their own aisle, I was no more enthusiastic. Eating maggots like little Michelin men the size of your thumb, whether they made their own oil or not, for me, that was one dish too far. Mac furnished the various flats and houses we lived in with the simplest of little nibby stools and tables, and made sure we had an earthenware goblet to keep drinking water cool. Whenever rum was poured, and whenever friends came round, it always was, he made sure to sprinkle a libation to the spirits in each corner of the room before a drop was drunk, not only in our own house, but in those of others, and liquor restaurants too. He was a maverick, and when his new boss at GBS decreed that all staff should wear shoes and socks to work in the tropical heat instead of sandals, he declined to obey and lost his job as a result. His passion was collecting folklore and describing the many varieties in multicultural Guyana in his radio programs. One of these was called Focus on Folk. Others were Max Magazine and Creole Meche Meche. As part of his research, with his faithful tape recorder always on hand, we attended a Kalimai Puja, a Muslim wedding, a kwekwe, and a comfort dance. One Easter, we went to see a physic nut tree bleed, and later we flew kites on the beach in Essequibo. At Fagua, he encouraged my baptismal drenching with flour and abir. Through him, I witnessed my first wake, and then my first open coffin funeral. I watched a lodge funeral procession passing down his road. We went fire gazing in defiance of the crowd pulling instruction on the radio to keep well away. I heard raucous quarrels through the open windows on the street. Me in concern about that. I was introduced to eye-pass and learned to suck teeth with a stoops. In learning Creolese, he was my reference and my guide for vocabulary, spelling, grammar, and intonation. And having always loved imitating accents, both in English and other languages, I dived into this new challenge with relish. An aspect of the Creolese lexicon, of which he was an avid collector, lay in its many proverbs, some of which had their origins in standard English, but many of which were unique to Guyana or other parts of the Caribbean, such as "You can't suck cane and whistle," or "One dirty bill dam," or "If you plant planting, you can't reap cassava." As a folklore specialist, he was sent on a broadcasting tour of the West Indies. He later participated in an International Folk Music Council conference in Jamaica. And having impressed a visiting German prince, he was invited to a tour of Germany, where some of his poetry had found an enthusiastic audience. Back home, he was renowned for compiling a list of nearly 40 Guyanese terms for love, of which taipi is probably the best known, with Typhosius Rikitix scoring high points for melody and humor. He included this list in a mini magazine he published himself called Oi, a folklore manual. This A4 leaflet, printed on bright yellow paper, also featured research into similar terms of love in the rest of the Caribbean, but found almost none. Besides an illustrated proverb and an explanation of the meaning and uses of the term oi itself, he included a longish article on Calimai. For his interest in folklore was by no means confined to that of his own Afro-Caribbean heritage. 1 second, I'll show you a picture of that publication. So this is Oi, the little magazine he published. It's just very small, just as I say, A4, well, A3 divided in 2, and the article on
how did he circulate that, Rosie? Did he? How did you get hold of it? Would he circulate it?
I think I had one copy when I was there. I'm not too sure now, but Roy Brummell sent me at least one, if not 2 others. I've got 3 copies altogether. But as far as I know, that he didn't publish any more. It was a plan to publish a whole series of these. But it may be that other people who live there, obviously after me, have got other copies, and Roy himself may have other copies. He'll be able to tell you in a minute. But I was really pleased. I had 1 copy, as I said, but I was really pleased to have another, if not 2 more. So, right. Yes, so his interest in folklore was by no means confined to that of his own Afro-Caribbean heritage. Likewise, he was as fascinated by Guyana's various religious beliefs. And ironically, although as far as I was aware, he was not religious himself, his memorial service in New York was presided over by no less than 10 spiritual leaders from a variety of religious faiths, including an imam, a pandit, and an archbishop. And the coffin of this man, who was by no means revered by the government of the day, was decked with little Guyanese flags. 2 ironies in 1. He planned to print more editions of his folklore manual, Oi, but I only have a single issue. Besides this, of course, he self-published many small booklets of poetry. His poems were on many subjects, not only about love and folklore, but touching too on politics, religion, and wildlife. And surprisingly, unlike his most famous poem, Old Higue, most of these were in standard English, of which he was a proud master. His letters to me were always meticulously written and punctuated, his tiny blue handwriting crammed onto sheets of pale blue airmail paper. In their various ways, they all evinced undying affection. But as my brother-in-law had warned me, he was a much married man, or as others might put it, in apparent contrast, he was not the marrying kind. and our marriage did not survive long past the birth of my daughter Shiri. But whatever my disillusion with him as a less than loving husband and father, I will always respect the amazing contribution he made to the promotion and preservation of Guyanese folk culture through his broadcasting, his journalism, his poetry, and his day-to-day encounters with ordinary people for whom he always had time. My memoir about my years with him, Wordsworth's White Wife, is available on Amazon. And I've got the link to that, which I can put in the chat later if anybody's interested. And I would add my voice to those calling for an archive of his tapes and articles to be preserved, catalogued, and safely housed in prestigious surroundings in his beloved homeland. One of those voices, the voices calling for his work to be preserved, would doubtless come from Dr. Judith Roback, another of his loves. She and I overlapped at some points in our history with him, although I wasn't aware of her at the time. It was not until after Mac's death, while responding to Roy Brummell's invitation to proofread the manuscript of his book, Me Buddy Bo Mac, that I came upon Judith's reminiscence. I read between the lines and asked Roy to see if she would be willing for us to be put in touch. She agreed, and years after the sting of any possible jealousy had time to fade, the former wife and former lover began an unusual and intense correspondence that has persisted until today. She has allowed me to quote these words about Mac on her behalf. His importance for Guyana and Guyanese was his firm belief in the value of things Guyanese, the culture, language, and law spanning the 6 peoples, and his commitment to educating Guyanese on that value. He made collections of songs, speech, beliefs, religious practices out of his own interest and for use in his writing and radio programs, through which he tried to persuade others of their enjoyment and importance. His own way personality, persona, and ways kept him apart from his society, in which he did not truly fit, but of which he was so firmly a part and about which he cared deeply. To some extent, his dedication and efforts were not really respected, and his unconventional style, interests, and ways were even at times, and by some, mocked. Guyana, and most Guyanese, spoke and acted overtly to decolonize the economy, politics, structure, and culture, but were in fact generally rather conventional. Wordsworth was thus seen by most as operating outside the Guyanese norm. And those are the words of Dr. Judith Roback. And at that point, I'll hand over.
Thank you so much, Rosie. I'm sure everybody will put their hands together to thank you for that really fascinating piece. I loved your accent, I have to say, that was brilliant. And also, I wonder what's happened to El Cid and Sweet Oil and all those characters. But I love Sweet Oil being good at cooking. I kind of obvious.
He was great. They were both great in their very different ways. El Cid was slim and young and vibrant, and Sweet Oil was a little bit sort of bigger, and he enjoyed the cooking. But he taught me a lot about cooking. I mean, I learned a lot from Matt, but I learned a lot from his mother later. I think I mentioned that somewhere.
Yeah.
But he was almost my first teacher really in cooking. When he came around, because I used to go around to Mac's mother's house every lunchtime. His mother wasn't then there. She'd gone to see some of her other children in the States. So Mac was living there, not exactly alone. He was living there with his brother Wilton and his partner, who was going to be his wife later, who lived there as well. But some of the time. But anyway, I would go around at lunchtime. Mac would come home from his work at GBS or Radio Dem, whichever he was working for at the time. And John Krizik would come as well, very often. I would take my little packed lunch, which I got from Joy Pilgrim, the lady I was staying with in Guyana as a VSO, and we would all eat together. But if Sweet Oil was there, he might cook something and I would be learning how to do it. I didn't have long because I had to go back to broadcasting schools and work. But within that hour, I would cycle there, have something to eat, meet the others, and then cycle back. Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I don't know if I was gonna pause for questions, but I think it'd be good if we actually do the whole, have all the
Sure.
three presentations and have questions at the end.
That's
so there's some comments in the chat already, and I'm just going to read one of them from Corinna. Corinna says that when Wordsworth passed, her father, Michael Sharples, actually wrote some memories of studying with him briefly at QC. And he said that he could recall at the time, this is a quote, I think, "We were both interested in the novels of the late Edgar Mittelholzer, and for amusement only, both of us would, from time to time, write short compositions in what we took to be his style, not to mention content. As a joke, we called these writings mittels. However, as I was soon to discover, Wordsworth's forte was poetry composition. I believe I was the first to be shown the draft of his brilliant poem, Old Higue, composed while he was still at school." So Michael Sharples goes on to say that his abiding memory of him, then soon to be celebrated poet, is of him seated at his desk in the classroom, eyes straight ahead and one hand busily stroking his chin as a sure sign that the muse had struck. So that was really lovely. Thanks, Corinna, for sharing your father's memories of him there. Really interesting. Now, you can't see everybody clapping, but I'm clapping on everybody else's behalf. And you might be able to see a few people whose screens are on clapping. But Rod, I'm going to ask, we're going to remove the spotlight from Rosie and then switch now to Roy Brummell.
Yeah, let's see if I can find Roy.
See if you can find Roy. I'll see if I can find Roy while you're also looking. There's a lot of people online.
I don't think he's in. What name is he under?
An odd name.
Yeah.
Starts with an M. I can't remember what it was because it's so odd.
Yeah, it's me brew.
That's
brew.
the one. That's
Okay.
one. If you can spotlight
Okay.
that, and then we'll ask him to put his video on.
Ask to start video. Ask to unmute.
Have you spotlighted him, Rod?
Not yet.
I'm still seeing you, so
yeah, I think he needs.
I love looking at you, of course.
He needs. He needs to actually put his video on to spotlight. I don't think his video is on.
Right.
Yeah,
there he is.
There he is.
Roy, can you just adjust the screen so that we can see you? We want more of your face, but hang on a minute. Hang on. Go back down again. Are you wearing Errol Brewster's t-shirt?
I am.
Oh, let's go down. Let's show everybody Errol Brewster's magic here.
I think Errol arranged this.
Is it deliberate? He's not as he's as dodgy as an ant.
Trying to make sure as many people as possible.
The trickster. Wonderful. Well, great to have you, Roy. And I'll just do a brief introduction here. So Roy was born in the agricultural village of Dartmouth on Guyana's Essequibo coast. As a youngster, Roy loved fishing so much on the Atlantic Ocean with his aunt's husband and his sons that he thought he would become a fisherman. However, Roy became a successful educator in Guyana and Brooklyn, New York. A keen multi-sport player, but mainly cricket. Roy also performed in Guyana as a storyteller, newspaper columnist, actor and presenter of Ganga Time, a radio folklore program. After 42 years as an educator, the last 23 being in Brooklyn, Roy now writes full-time. I was lucky enough to see where Roy lives via his WhatsApp. I'm so jealous, including of his swimming pool at the back. But he's famously the author of the novel Halfway Tree from, I think that was published 2020. And also your editor compiler of the book, Me Buddy Boo Mac, my brother Mac. It's going to be in 2 volumes. You've published the first volume. We're eager for the second volume. But I'd just like to hand over to you now, Roy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Well, I gave you a little throwback to the Ganga time introduction. That's how I started my program, with a whistle. And then I went to some words, but I'll cut it short today. Does everybody hear me clearly?
We can all hear you very well. Yeah.
All right.
We couldn't hear the whistling so much, so I might ask you to do it again at the end, but we can hear you well.
All right. So Mac was much thought of as a folklorist, but he was also a theater actor, a steel pan player, as Rosie said, a newspaper columnist, and more importantly, a poet. And as Mac would say, witness. What I want you to witness is that most of his articles were written for the Guyana Chronicle, where he worked from 1969 to 1971. And all of them were written in English. And these articles were on social and political issues. We don't have time to look at them today, but I'm sure those of you who are interested can go scout around the Chronicle from 1969 to 1971, and you will find them. And witness again, his poems were nearly all written in English. Rosie didn't mention the collections, and I'll just add a little bit to what she said about those poems being written in English. Blue Galding, 1958. That's one of his collections. And there's a poem in that also called Blue Galding. I asked Mac about his writing in English when I encountered the Blue Galding, and he said at the time T.S. Eliot was a strong influence on him. He was trying to write like T.S. Eliot. Then there is 40 Meditations on a Theme, 1963. Selected Poems of Wordsworth, 1966. More poems, I got that from Rosie. Mac published those in 1970. Canadian Broadcasting Corporation Competition Poems. Now, that's a title I gave that collection. I got a collection of poems from Dr. Judith Roback, and they were dated 1980. There was no name to the collection, and I named them Canadian Broadcasting Corporation Competition Poems, because I believe he had written them for a Canadian Broadcasting Corporation competition. And then poems written in the USA. Those had no name. I got those from Vic and Stanley. And they were written between 1980 and 1986. Then he has poems in different publications. He has 222, which is in a magazine called Creation. Then he has Independence, which is in a treasury of Guyanese poetry, edited by A.J. Seymour, 1980. And I must add here that I or anyone may not be able to see all the articles and poems that Mac wrote. For example, a few years ago, Judith Roback sent me a Wordsworth McAndrew poem titled Agony. Sir Ronald Sanders said Mac spent time with he and his wife and wrote a poem for them. unfortunately, Ron couldn't find that poem to share it with me. Then I met someone else whose name is Jem Madu. She said Mac wrote a poem for her, but she also couldn't find it. And Judith mentioned an article titled Music in Guyana in a publication edited by Joy Alsop, Vivi Thorne, P.A. Braithwaite, and Serena Braithwaite. And that article, I found out, is at Warwick University in England. I wrote them, and I wasn't successful in getting that article. I don't remember what they said, but it was something to the effect that they couldn't share it with me. So those of you who are in England, that's something you might be interested in, that Wordsworth McAndrew article, Music in Guyana, edited by Joy Alsop, Vivi Thorne, P.A. Braithwaite, and Serena Braithwaite. So as I said, most of Mac's poems were written in standard English, but a few that I'm aware of that were written in Creolese or to Walter Rodney, and that one is in voice print, edited by Stuart Brown, Mervyn Morris, and Gordon Rollaire. I'll just read a little piece of that one to Walter Rodney. Yeah, you couldn't make it, Walter. I could have tell you so, but you never asked. You believe that because you're born here and on top of that, you're damn good at your job, that Guyana would have take you back in things nothing. But you believe wrong. Remember Rosie Douglas and the political asylum promise? They got a word for it though, a white people word, pragmatism. And those a word that you should know since the shearer time. But you go and get fooled by a smaller word than the H-O-M-E. Let me tell you, boy, home don't mean what you think it mean. Home is the yard where your neighbors string berry. Home is the house where your wife and your old lady are tomorrow or wherever the Kabaka feel. That is the latest screel upon Guyana. And that is the situation that all of we can get for help to change. That's the Walter. And then the other one that I'm aware of that's written in Creolese is Conundrum Number 1. He has two of them, Conundrum Number 1 and Conundrum Number 2, but I'll just read a couple of lines from Conundrum Number 1. Who got power? The power sending them mad. Who got mad already? Sending the rest mad. So who ain't gone mad yet? Gonna go mad. Who did good? Get bad. Who did bad? Get good. Who did wavering saying, man, I got to live. When they didn't do their badness, had to decide by now whether they got to live kneeling down or standing up. Who want freedom? Ain't gonna get them. Who ain't want them? Ain't gonna miss them. Who did living dead? Who living gone dead? Who too upright? Don't want to vote for the PNC. Done dead already. So that's from Conundrum Number 1. Then there's Masterclass. Old Higue, I'm not going to read from that because so many people know that. I just wanted to show you that this here is the original Old Higue that he wrote. And The sketch there is by John Crissick, when Mac wrote that in 1963. I was lucky to get that from John Crissick, and that is in, or rather, 62. I said 63, 1962. And this is included in my volume 2. And the other poems that I read are also included in volume 2. Now, some comments on Old Higue. And there was an incident in a place in Guyana called Beirut. That's on the East Coast, where some people mistook a lady, her name being Radhika Singh. They mistook her for an Old Higue and they beat this lady to death. Very unfortunate. I told Mac about it, and somebody blamed him, and he laughed at being blamed, but he was very sorry that this has happened to the lady. In an article where she provides examples of brutality against women in Guyana, Savitri Prasad, at the time a PhD student in social and political thought at York University in Canada, mentions Radhika Singh's gruesome death and adds, folklorist Wordsworth McAndrew's famous poem, Old Higue, is much loved and celebrated. Old Higue is a part of the cultural patrimony of Guyana. Parents and grandparents dramatically recount the tale of the Old Higue to children, and children would tell this story to both their peers and elders, including in elocution performances, in school, and on stage. It has become a way of reaffirming our Guyanese-ness, a tradition of proud folk tradition of the nation. But few of us stop to ask what kind of violence the story promotes, specifically against women, how it casts them as dangerous and as threatening the future because they threaten innocent children, and how this tale requires their torture and murder. Well, that's what Savitri Singh, who at the time was Savitri Prasad, who at the time was a PhD student, wrote. That's in the Stabric News of October 3, 2011, if anybody wants to check it out. Stabric News, October 3rd, 2011. Now my comment on that is, I'm sorry, Mac isn't alive to defend himself. I don't think Savitri Singh would have been allowed to just get away with that. But let me say that Mac would not change anything. He's very stick-to-itive. He wouldn't change any fact about anything, nothing in folklore. He would write it as he received it. He was a very stick-to-itive man, so far as details of cultural things are concerned. But let me just say a little bit in his defense. There are lots of other cultural things, for example, songs, that seem to have some violence in them. They seem to. But that's the way they came down. And are we going to change them, try to sanitize them? Mark certainly wouldn't support that. So, for example, Sanko Liki Love Upon the Down. I don't know if you all remember that song. Sanko Liki Love Upon the Down and the Gala Hala Morda. Sanko Liki Love Upon the Down and the Gala Hala Morda. Bip Bap Police are come and the Gala Hala Morda. Sanko Kiki Love Upon the Down and the Gala Hala Morda. So we can go on ad-libbing. We can put in that he kicked, that he chased, and so forth. Are we then going to sanitize that? Change things, take out things, because it sounds like violence against women? It's an interesting question to consider. And then we have another one here, this other folk song, Daimo dio, daimo di la, daimo dio, daimo lida, daimo dio, daimo di la. Y'all are gonna broke up your daimo di. Not a spoon on the table, not a fork on the table, not a towel to drive me hand. Y'all are gonna broke up your daimo di. A lot of these songs have lines that suggest there is some type of violence or brutality in them. So it's a very interesting question. And going back to Savage's concern, are we going to change these because they sound violent? Mac was a person who kept any and everything, especially literal things. He just kept them. Old newspapers, old magazines. Well, they would look old to us, but they weren't really old to him. He just held on to things. And some of them that I received, I made sure that the University of Guyana and the National Archives received them. I mailed those things to those institutions, and they received them and acknowledged receiving them. So to Rosie's point about archiving Mac's work, at least some of them have gone to the University of Guyana. Some of his newspapers. And some of the newspapers have also gone to the National Archives. They received some of his magazines as well. I sent some of his cassettes and some DVD tapes to NCN, a lot of them. So Rosie, I started the process, and some of them, I hope, will be saved. Amongst the things Mac kept were, in addition to newspapers and magazines, he kept poems. Now this is important because the works he kept are not works known by recognized poets. Of course, he had in his collection works by Morton Carter and Walter McLawrence and Donald Trotman. People know those names, but who knows the name B.A. Agard, B.W. Chancellor? That sounds to me like Bertie Chancellor, who used to work at the radio station. I don't know. Eric Roach, Antonio Silva, Sheila Van Sertima, E. Guitar Levens, James W. Harper, Frankie Dalzell. Has anybody heard those names? Well, this was the type of person, he just held on to things that were valuable to him and really should be of value to us as well. And let me show you something else that he kept. I don't know if you can see this well. It's a note Martin Carter wrote to him way back in 1963. And so Martin says to Mac here on this note, you, being perhaps one of the only persons I know with a practitioner's interest in verse, I enclose these 5 new poems for you to see. And so Mac did hold the 5 poems, and he also held the note. At the time, Mac was 27 years of age when Martin wrote this. And one last piece of, there's so many things he held on to. It would take us a long time to talk about those things. I found a very interesting document, a newspaper document amongst his papers. There was a document comparing the 1964 and 1968 Guyana elections. Anybody remember any of the parties that supported those? But he did keep that as well. This here, you recognize the face?
Mm-hmm.
You recognize what it's saying?
Yeah. You have a vote.
It's a flyer showing Mr. Burnham, former President Burnham, as a PPP candidate.
Can you
Back
read
in
it to us?
1950.
Hold it up a little bit more and a bit further back. Yeah, there we go. BG general election, April 27th. You have a vote. Give it to Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. Wow, he looks so young in that picture.
There you go.
Yeah.
See, so many people would have forgotten that Mr. Burnham was a PPP candidate. But see, I kept the evidence.
Vote for the PPP. That's amazing.
And this here, may not be able to read this very well, but it's his mother's voting card. Get that too.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
So are these things going to go into volume 2?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Will be involved. All right, so finally, I have to tell you how I met him. Kept that for the last. I met Mac through the GMC short story radio program. He was the editor, and lots of people wrote stories for him, including my good friend there, Wicked John Y. Yes, so Mac, he liked my stories, and he had me write more and more. In one of those stories, The Great Jackass Race, the first prize for the winner was something called Fazak. Fazak, where I grew up, was the name for rice wine. And so after Mac heard that, he said he had to try it. So he and Stanley, I hope you're there, buddy. He and Stanley came to my home in Festival City on the outskirts of Georgetown to try some Fazak. Stanley came with his guitar and we sang some songs and we drank the Fazak. So what's important in that is, here's a point I want to make. Mac never took things for granted, or as people said them. He had to experience it firsthand. If you mention a drink to him, he had to try it. If somebody had a comfort, he had to be there. If someone mentioned something about the masquerade, he had to be there. Whatever experience it was, he wanted to try to be a part of it. And on that note, I will close.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. You know, while you were talking, I know when Rosie, when you were talking, you'd mentioned about Mac losing his job, I think at the Guyana Broadcasting Corporation because he refused to wear shoes. But then I saw, I think Margaret Lawrence is in the room, and I think obviously Margaret was one of Guyana's most talented stage actresses, and she worked at the Guyana Broadcasting Corporation, and I seem to remember there was some talk about Wordsworth being part of the Guyana Corporation because he announced on air that some port knockers had caught a Massacuraman in the bush. and the Massacuraman was on show in a museum somewhere. So I don't know at what point he got the job or lost the job, but I just saw Margaret's name online, and I was reminded of that story. Roy, thank you so much for joining us. That was really fascinating, very rich. I mean, I really appreciate all the information that you shared there with us. Please stay with us, because we'll have a Q&A and a conversation afterwards. There's so many fantastic people online who I'd love to bring into the conversation, and I think we can have a really rich conversation afterwards. But I'm going to, I think now, John, if your screen is working, we might try and bring in the wicked John Y, as Roy calls you. We might try and bring you back to share your poem. Let me just see if I can spotlight you, John. I've got you on spotlight. Before I bring in everybody, please put your hands together again, just for Roy, just for a moment, to say thank you so much. Really appreciated that. Thank you. And then, okay, so now, John, I've got you there. I'm just going to try and bring up so that people can follow it along with you. But if you can share the poem that's on the screen at the moment, that would be fantastic. We want to see actually whether your Creole voice is as good as Rosie's.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Right, before we go on to that, I want to clear up who is this Old Higue I'm hearing about? I know about Old Higue, but everybody talking about Old Higue.
That's our terrible English accent, I'm afraid.
The Old Higue I know is one commonly known as a fire ass.
That's why they call you the wicked John Y.
That's why the wicked John Y, yeah. And I know all about fire asses because I'm all right, Betty, I won't mention you. But yes, and the other thing I would like to ask just before we go is to ask Rosie. I was intrigued to see you introduce Wordsworth's types of love. And one definition I would be very pleased if you could kindly read out to us afterwards, and that is the definition of totilotipo. I'm sure you've got it there, and so perhaps we could come back to you afterwards to find out exactly what is totilotipo. Going back to this Dutchman, and by the way, I see your picture of Fairmaid pictured with legs, and my understanding of a Fairmaid was that you only saw half. Whichever way you turn, there is Fairmaid in front of you, massive creature, but you only saw the top half. Perhaps somebody could correct me on that. Okay, back to Nightline. Dutchman haunt the backdam. Moongazer there at the gate. Gal, don't you go out walking? Now it's past the hour of 8. Massacuraman there in the trenches, and Fairmaid on the shore. Look, Jumbie at the window. Here, Nakman at the door. Bacco there in the wardrobe. Gal, you better hide. Thief man already under the bed, and you unable to run outside. Old Higue there in the kitchen. Now they all coming, see? Quick! Only one place you go safe. And that's in here, with me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. That was great. That was fun and great. We'll have a discussion and bring you in a little bit later. I'm going to go back to Rosie now, since you asked Rosie to clarify. Hang on a second. Let me just remove.
Totilotipo.
Pokey Loki Po or something.
Totilotipo.
Well, all right. Thank you, Carl, for the correction.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, good. Well, he doesn't give a definition for that, but it's number 5. So the first 5 are taipi, chirangi, chirangi bang bang, chirangi loop, totilotipo. So that's the 5th one. Some of the others have got clarification. If you'd like me, I'll pick out 1 or 2 of those. Tis is when your senses can't collect. Logicoma is soon as you see she, you faint.
He's
Kuntokyo.
amused.
What? Okay. Kuntokyo is he watchman's her, and Gege, she watchman's him. And the next one, 18. Kuntokyo modern Gege, bloodshed a must. And then 23. Richie Chi Chi, you're washing she fine clothes. I presume that means underwear. I'm not sure. So if you like washing your ladies' knickers, that's what goes on there. A couple of the others are a little bit rude. I'd better not read those out online. But the last one, number 40, although he does miss out one, there aren't actually 40. I don't know if I can say this. Eza putilinguf. Yes, Eza putilinguf. Taipi till you bazudi. So that's the definition of that.
Bazadi, type it till your Bazadi.
Bazadi, okay, Bazadi, right. So those are the ones with definitions. The others, it's just a list, okay, and just a few of them have explanations. But no, that's lovely. Thank you for asking. And I know we have to get on to Stanley. I'm worried about Stanley not getting a chance. He's been waiting there all that time.
Just before you go,
So I'll hand you back.
Okay, thank you, Rosie.
Just before you go, I would like to perhaps fill in the gap, because the definition I have of fotilotipo is that you are so enamored with the young lady that you would eat your meal out of her chamber pot.
Ah,
Don't call me John Y for nothing.
John, the wicked John Y.
They don't call me wicked for nothing, pal.
They don't. Well, there you
I
go.
want to know why John Y wasn't still on this program. When it was mooted in July, he was going to be one of the speakers, and suddenly he vanished and the title changed. So I'm rather puzzled by that. I don't know John Y. Nice to meet you, but I wonder why you are, no longer on the panel.
Well, he is sort of. He wanted to be on the panel in the audience. And which he is. So he's always welcome to pop in and contribute as and when. But yes, let me just remove the spotlight, Rosie, and then Rod, can you find Stanley and spotlight Stanley for us?
Absolutely. Stanley spotted right now.
Wonderful. So, I mean, I feel a bit daft introducing Stanley because everybody knows Stanley. And if they don't, I'm going to slap their wrist because they should do. But anyhow, Stanley Greaves, as you know, describes himself as a maker of things, a painter. This is me adding this in. I see him as a Guyanese painter and writer and a maker of things, who is one of the Caribbean's most distinguished artists. And writing in 1995 at the time of a retrospective exhibition to celebrate his 60th birthday, Rupert Narayan stated, "It may be that no major Caribbean artist of our time has been more fecund and versatile than Stanley Greaves of Guyana." Greaves himself has said of his own creativity, "I still don't talk about myself as making art. Other people do that. I'm a maker of things. In the early days, I found empty matchboxes, cigarette boxes, bits of string, wire, empty boot polish tins, whatever, and made things. Drawing was just another activity, and it still is. My favorite medium is still wood, of course. My hitherto secret preoccupation with writing poems, which has now come to light, is another form of making. Recently at the University of Birmingham, where I did a reading, I was asked if the paintings influenced the poetry, and I said, no, they come from the same source." So I just thought it was worth quoting that because it was really interesting insight into Stanley's work. But Stanley here, of course, is here in his capacity of a friend of Wordsworth McAndrew, a dear friend, I understand, and a drinking partner. So Stanley, over to you.
Well, it was great seeing you and listening to you, Rose, and congratulations on your accent. It tells me that you have a very good ear. You have a very good ear to pick up those inflections. Yeah. this thing about totiloti po, if you notice the ending of the word is po, which was our expression for pot de chambre from our French background in Guyana. So instead of saying pot de chambre, we just say po. At first, sometimes people say posy, but then you realize that posy could also be the little flower you put in your buttonhole, buttonhole kind of thing. So, but po, yeah, totiloti po, pot de chambre, French. The listening to both Rose and Roy filled in some blank spaces because I was in England for 6 years, during which time Wordsworth wrote a lot of poems and things like that, which I missed. Anyway, it's really very moving to be listening to reminiscences of Wordsworth. He was very close to me. We were soul brothers. I met Wordsworth through a mutual friend, Norma Prasad, who was a member of the Working People's Art class. Norma lived in Newtown near to Wordsworth, and she thought that he'd be somebody that I should meet. And so I did meet Wordsworth. He was referred to as Scout Mac, and that's because when he was at Queen's College, he was in the Boy Scouts. And he was, I use the word deliberately, he was a very severe Boy Scout. You don't mess around with it. And that's why he got that name at Mac. So people usually used to refer to him as Scout Mac. The first thing that attracted me to Wordsworth was his being a conversationalist. Wordsworth loved conversations. And one of the things about being a conversationalist, of course, is your ability to listen. So Wordsworth was a very keen listener, because if you misuse a word, you had to explain how you use that word. And if there was some disagreement, well, then he always went to his Bible, which was a huge Oxford dictionary on his desk. So during the conversation, you refer to that several times to clear up the meaning of a word and how it was used. And that reminded me very much of the years actually I spent with Martin Carter, because he was very keen as well as being very precise in the use of words and languages, which got me into trouble when I was teaching at Burbage High School, because the children said I was not a Guyanese. Yeah. The thing about his being a conversationalist as well, checking accuracy of words, it was, I think, trying to make sure that ideas and concepts were very clearly expressed, so there's no doubt as to what you meant. Wordsworth was a person of very strong convictions, and those convictions were held in a very rigorous manner, and therefore anything that he said or did, as Roy said, if that was challenged, you would get a very strong response from Wordsworth. This business of being very convincing, I think, was also part of his body language, because when Wordsworth had to make a point, or if he was reacting to something you said, it was expressed in his body language as well as in his laughter, followed by a drink, of course. The poetry, I missed a number of his poems because I was in England at the time when he did a lot of publications of his poems. But the Old Higue poem comes to mind, and I always wondered about that word Old Higue. And it's not until I went to Barbados that I made the connection, because Old Higue is really the Barbadian pronunciation of Old Hag. So Hag becomes Higue. And if you know Bajans and how they pronounce the word, you can see the connection immediately. So Old Hag became Old Higue. That's one of the Bajan connections. And the other was kite flying. A lot of things in kite flying, like singing engine. The singing engine, I used to wonder in Ghana, how do kites, engines do not sing? But when I went to Barbados, a kite which was tied to a tree and left flying in the air was referred to as a singing angel, which be changed in Guyana to singing engine. The Bajan-Guyana connection is very strong and is reflected in our language and even in one or two of the folk songs, which we feel are Guyanese folk songs, but are really Bajan folk song, like The Little Brown Boy in the Ring. That's a Bajan folk song. He liked to recite his poems and took part in the verse speaking competitions. I'm sorry that those competitions no longer exist. So in his reading of Old Higue during a competition, as far as I'm concerned, it was not a reading, it was a performance. So he performed as he read. So in a way, he was a performance artist long before I knew about the term as performance artist, but that's what he was doing. He performed Old Higue and he won the first prize. Now, of his poems, there is one in particular that struck me because my religion is duality. Whatever exists, so does its opposite. And both of them are equally powerful, like God and the devil. When I was in secondary school, St. Stanislaus, and you were talking about God is all powerful and God is all this and that, I used to wonder, well, if God is all powerful, why the hell does he put the devil in hell? Get rid of the devil. And that led me on exploring religions and theology, and I came to certain conclusions. And my conclusion was duality is my religion. I believe in the law or rule, the existence of opposites. And for that reason, there was a poem that he wrote about the crow. How did the crow become black? And that poem intrigued me because it fitted in with my concept of duality. And I did an illustration for it.
Ah, yes.
A pen and ink drawing. This is the original. I did prints. But the thing that caught me was that the crow was white originally. And as it was flying, it went up to explore the heavens. It wanted to know what was beyond heaven. We're getting into serious metaphysics here now. So the crow flew up and up until it broke through this barrier and came into the presence of the sun or some force or whatever. But the experience turned the crow black. And I thought that that's a tremendous image, visual image, because I think visually anyway. And so I did that drawing of how did the crow turn black. Of course, Wordsworth celebrated his African roots, and I am honoring him today by wearing this dashiki, which was given to me by one of my son-in-laws who is from West Africa. And today actually is the first time I'm wearing it. And because Wordsworth wears the dashiki and he wore his sandals. At first he wore the rubber slip-slops, and then that got him into trouble. So he started to wear sandals because he says socks and shoes don't go with the dashiki, sandals. So he started wearing the leather sandals. Part of his radio program in talking about folk. Of course, in the folk is your mama, your papa, your auntie or your uncle who are not necessarily your relatives. Any adult person is an aunt or an uncle. Lesser would be a cousin this and cousin that. And so on the program, he would be doing this, interviewing people. And somebody from a ministry, I think it was the Ministry of Information and Culture, phoned him to say that, that President Burnham wanted to know why he wasn't using comrade in his radio program. And Wordsworth's response was that on a folk program, the word comrade does not apply. And he continued to use it. He had no more problem with comrade. Folklorist, yes. And I always wondered why it was that Dr. Alsop in his dictionary did not use Wordsworth McAndrew as an informant. I read the names of the informants, and as far as I'm concerned, some of them shouldn't be there. Some of them, I'm repeating it, some of them should not be there. Wordsworth was a person who should have been on his major person on his list of informants, and he wasn't. And as a matter of fact, I went through the book and looked through all of the entries, and I wrote a 6-page response to that, because some of those entries were inaccurate, some of them half-truth, and some words were left out. I never got a response from the worthy doctor, but I still have those 6 pages. The drinking thing. Well, during conversations, we had to drink, because whenever somebody made a point, you had to fire one. And the thing was that they're drinking, at least the two of us together, when we were drinking and conversing, the drinking followed the traditional Guyanese pattern, which was you will drink from a shot glass, not from a big glass. You did not mix your drink, because that was a foreign importation when the Americans came to Guyana during the war. They cannot drink the rum straight, they have to mix it with something. So that's how the Coca-Cola and the Pepsi-Cola and the orange juice and all that started to be mixed with rum. Well, Wordsworth and I, we never did that. And I still don't do that. I never liked that. So you had to drink from a shot glass, like the old time people, like my father and his friends. And so you knocked it off from the schnapps, little tiny glasses, the schnapp glasses, and you followed with water. Now, I have here a construction I made. It's called Eldorado's rum bottle. I don't have any schnapp glasses because I used up all the schnapp glasses in this construction.
What? I love it.
Yes, it's called Eldorado's rum bottle.
This is
We have it with
my
the
rum bottle.
glasses all around. And
You're not the only one with a rum bottle, you know.
huh?
Me
You're not
too.
the only one with a rum bottle.
Yeah, this is modeled after the Eldorado bottle.
Yes, yes.
And then because it's Eldorado gold, the top part of it is actually 20-carat gold leaf. So it's real gold leaf.
Wow.
See, it's hollow because I had to make it like a barrel, as if you're constructing a barrel. It's not solid. So I made it as if you're constructing a barrel, and then the top was carved. This top was carved by hand. It wasn't turned on a machine. And then it was gilded. So this is Eldorado's rum bottle.
Nice.
So that's where all my schnapp glasses. I had 6 of them, and that's
All
where.
right. You know what to get you for Christmas then.
Yeah, that's where the schnapp glasses disappeared to. Another thing was that Wordsworth was born on the 22nd of November, and I was born on the 23rd, so I'm on the cusp. So Wordsworth was a true Scorpio person, personality-wise and everything else. I'm half and half. So I'm more Sagittarian in my outlook, but if you humbug me, then I turn Scorpio immediately. Literally immediately. It's a frightening transposition. I don't, So we decided we would celebrate our birthdays together. And originally it was just the 2 of us drinking and so on and so on. And one or 2 of his friends, like the Calypsonians that Roy mentioned, became part of the party. So we would have to go to Wordsworth's place. Nothing was cooked beforehand. The cooking was done when you arrived. That was when the cooking was done. So while the cooking was going on, while the cooking was going on, of course, the drinking and the singing and all the rest of it. And so we spent the evening at the birthday party. So we started on the evening of the 22nd and took the party over into the early morning of the 23rd, my birthday time. We did that a few times. And then the party got bigger. And then we got at the idea, let us have, they became quite interesting, popular amongst friends of ours. So then we got the idea, you know what, we should have a practice birthday party. That would be a good thing to do, a practice birthday party. So we had a practice birthday party. And people said, you guys are crazy. We're having a practice. I said, listen, if you're a member of a team, don't you have to practice before you go to the big match? If you're a member of a choir, you have to practice before you go to the big match. So practice birthday party. At the time, there was this exodus of people from Guyana, and a number of our friends left, leaving. And so there was a spate of farewell parties. So we used to go to farewell parties as well. So now, if we know that Rod Westmus is leaving and he has a farewell party, well, first of all, we're going to have a practice farewell party for Rod before before the final party. So that
Why
was
not? As you do.
else. That was something else. The other thing too, as I said before, this commitment to the folklore was, of course, his very deep, fundamental respect for traditions, and especially for the working class people who were down to earth, because their vision was not obscured by political speakings and all the rest of it. You know, the sophistication, forget about it. They're straight and direct to the heart. And so you have the Proverbs. Now, I always regarded well, not always, but for a while, I began to think about the Guyanese Proverbs really as the foundation of a Guyanese philosophy. I said this to a former headmaster of mine, and he asked me, what are you talking about? I said, well, when you think about it, a philosophy is about the way in which you deal with the reality, whether it's a physical reality or whether it's a reality of thought of your mind. And so the people of Guyana, the folk people of Guyana who created those sayings, they were dealing with reality one-to-one, and that was their reaction to it. And I remembering the one called 1-1 Dirty Bill Down. That's universal, because it's in the French. You have petit à petit l'oiseau fait son nid. Little by little, the bird builds its nest. And I thought, this is something else. And those proverbs were never really, I think, presented in that manner as a Guyanese philosophy. When I was at the University of Guyana, I tried to get them to introduce philosophy, introduction to philosophy for all students. I failed the first time because I believe people on the board felt, what the hell does Greaves know about philosophy? He only know about painting pictures. Yes,
little do they know.
I felt so. I felt very strongly so. Judging by other reactions as well to my presence on campus. Now, Joel Benjamin, a formidable mind, and I repeat, a very formidable mind. Joel Benjamin, Martin Carter, another one, Rupert Rupner-Ryan, and Bill Carr. Now, those four who were part of my faculty, Joel was in the library. I knew Joel well. So I said to this, listen, guys, this is the presentation I made to the board. You guys are well-versed in literature and philosophy and all the rest of it. Why don't you go to the board and make your presentation? Their presentation was thrown out. The presentation was thrown out. And at that point, I said to myself, I am not at a real university. At that point, that was my belief. And I still have that conviction that those folklores, if you look at those folkloric sayings, that one can extrapolate, or what is the fancy word, a Guyanese philosophy, which is really down to earth for one, but it's also giving you a very clear picture about the reaction to the reality of what Guyana was and probably still is to some extent. So that was something that I find it hard and difficult to get over. The fact that those things were not recognized in that manner and they were dismissed as perhaps foolishness. What else do I have to say? What I have to say next was that the folk songs, because of my interest in music, I used to collect those from Wordsworth, and I have a collection of them. I have about 60, it's either 64 or 66 of those songs. And I categorize them as children's songs. They are work songs used by men. They are the songs from the Gold Bush, the Pork Knockers. They are songs that referring to women. They are the Quaker songs. They are songs which are sung at wakes. And I hope that I can do something with those songs sometime soon as well, because they need to be recorded. Now, because of the lascivious nature of those songs, which were mentioned a little earlier, some people sort of try to clean them up. And the cleaned up songs, as far as I'm concerned, is an obscenity. That's an obscenity. The songs which have been cleaned up. And I know that there's the folk songs of Guyana by Leonard Dolphin, and she did clean up some of those songs, so I don't bother to go into that book anymore. I leave that book on my shelf. I deal with the ones in my notebook, because they're dealing with the way in which people reacted to the society, how the society behaved at the time. So those folk songs, as well as the folk sayings, it is a fantastic collection from which to extrapolate a Guyanese philosophy. And I'm not an academician, otherwise I would have done it. I leave something like that for the academicians. Let them get on with that. So that's my homework to them. That's my homework for them. Now, so I would now like to sing a selection of those songs. Not the song in its entirety, because they're very repetitive, and they're meant to be, because rhythm is the basis, the very fundamental of music, the base of music from Africa. Rhythm is everything. You see them dance when they're in a parade. You see them dance when they are in some action against the government. They dance at funerals. It's their dance, and that is rhythm. And that is, of course, you find it in their drums. So the first one I'm going to sing is called My Voice. I have a terrible singing voice, so you'll excuse that, but I will try my best. The first is Kanji Water. And for me, it reflects the words of someone, a slave who has apparently been able to make it across Kanji Water, because the first thing is me over Kanji Water. So this is probably a slave who's running away. And if he's running away and getting over Kanji Water, Kanji should be Kanya because it's Dutch. He's free, but he's seeing somebody over there. He's still seeing somebody over there. Me over Kanji Water. And I think that probably relates to the Dutch occupation, probably before the 1763 revolution. I use the word revolution rather than rebellion. Rebellion sounds like something coming out of your backyard, you know? But it was a revolution because it was trying to initiate social and economic change. So that's the first one, Kanji Water. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong key. Oh, me over Kanji Water, Shimanoke. Me over Kanji Water, Shimanoke. Away Shanti Palala, Shimanoke. Away Chimanodi, Meova Kanji Wata, Chimanodi, Meova Kanji Wata, Chimanodi, Awe Sandi Balala, Chimanodi, Awe Sandi Balala, Chimanodi. I'm very nervous. I play very beautifully when I'm by myself, but playing for people, I'm a little nervous. Anyway.
We're enjoying every minute of it, Stanley. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
In fact, somebody's already popped in the chat box, therapeutic Mr. Greaves. We're all having music therapy from you, so now we're enjoying it.
Okay. The next one is called Oh Me Love a Letter Lost. Now the pork knockers, the golden diamond seekers, pork knockers, because they like to eat salt meat and salt pork. In those days, they were rations. There are no radios, and one way of keeping in touch was by letters. And so you had to meet somebody with a boat at some landing in order to be able to hand over the letter to them. And they would bring back, responses for you. So in this case, this one, he had a letter, but his letter got lost. So he's oh, me love a letter lost. And he's telling people that if they find it, he's going to give them carrot stone. And for some people, he's not going to give them a carrot stone, but he's going to give them a piece of brass. So I don't know why he was going to do that. Anyway, here we go. Oh, me love a letter lost. Oh, me love a letter lost. Oh, me love a letter lost. And if you find a Amigo, give you carrot stone. Don't care what she mama going to say. Don't care what she papa going to say. Don't care what she brother going to say. And if you find a Amigo, give you a piece of brass. That's it. In love with other stuff. There's another one to it that is about Merriman Fisher boat. He has a letter to send to his lover, but when he got to the stelling or the landing, Merriman, who fishes in the river, his fisher boat had left already, so he couldn't carry the letter. So he sang a thing about Merriman Fisher boat lost. Anyway, the next one is an interesting one. It's called The Pepper Sauce Woman. And I was told that the song really was based on a lady from New Amsterdam who was referred to as the pepper sauce woman. So I'm thinking that from the words of the song, it wasn't really pepper sauce that she was selling. And I think that really the pepper sauce was a description of her personality. So she was the pepper sauce woman. The pepper sauce woman, pepper sauce woman, pepper sauce woman walking along with your sanga bachelor. That's the sauce woman, pepper sauce woman, pepper sauce woman walking along with the sanga bachelor. Oh, what a shame, she has lost her name. Oh, what a shame, she has lost her name. The pepper sauce woman walking along with a sanga bachelor. I don't know who to blame. Walking down the lane. The pepper sauce woman walking along with your sanga bachelor. The other song is a very strange song. It's supposed to be a children's song, but there's a certain macabre element to it. But it also has something of historic significance. I don't know how many people are aware of this. But there was a time in Guyana when people used to try to grow grapes, and that was due to the Portuguese influence. So Those who had little private gardens, they would put up an arbor and they would try to cultivate the grapevine. Where I lived in 132 Camacutt Street in a tenement yard, the landlord, the big house in front, as we call it, the big house, he had an arbor for growing grapes, and one could see the remains of the arbor because it had all dried up. So this is a song where a little girl probably has picked a grape or two and the mother didn't like it. So the mother buried her alive. So the father now is going to look for her and he's walking around looking for her. And then he hears a voice singing. But the voice that is singing is also a lesson in anatomy because the father is being told where he was not to walk and also saying something about what happened to her because of picking this grape that her mother didn't want her to pick. Do, father, don't you mash my head. Do, father, don't you mash my head. Do, father, don't you mash my head. For this wicked, wicked woman has buried me alive for one god grape. Do, father, don't you mash my heart. Do, father, don't you mash my heart. Do, father, don't you mash my heart. For this wicked, wicked woman has buried me alive for one god grape. Do, father, don't you mash my foot. Do, father, don't you mash my foot. Do, father, don't you mash my foot. For this wicked, wicked woman has buried me alive for one god grape. So that's supposed to be a children's song, a very serious song. The last one I'd like to do is
can I stop you there a moment, Stanley?
Yeah.
The last one I think a lot of us are familiar with, and I would love us to all join in with that. But before then, can I bring in John Y? Because I just wanted John to read one of his poems before we go, so that we could end with your song, Stanley.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah. So I'm gonna bring in John if John is still there. And I'm going to try and add a spotlight to him as well.
Yes, I'm still here.
You're still there. You had a wicked poem to share with us.
Oh yeah. This is one which I wrote. This is the one where I read it out recently, and rumor had it that I read out something entirely out. I wrote this during the time when we were in Guyana, and a lot of Guyanese were all running to the USA, and when they would, USA didn't really want them, but they wanted to deprive Guyana of their skills. And I got a bit fed up with this, so I wrote this poem called In a Rum Shop. In a rum shop just the other day, I overheard a young man say that he found socialism drab, and cooperativism made him grab for a ticket to the USA. Capitalism, says he, has glamour. It's bright, exciting, all the clamour and thrill of private enterprise. It deafens the ears and blinds the eyes to the junkie's stare and the poor man's cries. Brothers, come, I bid you rise and drink a toast to the US dollar. Some stood and drank, and others cheered. Most turned their heads away. And then outside on the road appeared and the young man's mother, and with her in glad array, two sisters and a younger brother. Though the sun was hot, they strode erect and laughed together as they made their way to the co-op plot. This was too much for me to bear, and I asked the young man standing there, how is it that you feel so free to drink while the rest of your family are occupied so busily? And he told me, I don't care. Look at my mother, then cried he. 6 children she's had, including me. Hard work has always been her lot. And now she's turned 40, What has she got? But a leaking roof, dry rot, and a share in the village cooperative plot. He paused, as in through the rum shop door swept a flashy young barroom whore, who gave him a nod and received a wink. She called for a beer. He paid for the drink, then turned back to me and said, "Do you think that I want to stay in this place all my life? Hard work, my companion, village girl for my wife, to become like my mother." And I said, "Brother, stop. Just look at your family, each one well fed. See how tall and straight your brother's grown, and happy each night as they lie in their bed. And give thanks to God for the roof overhead, leak as it might, for at least it's their own. And the work at the co-op, which you seem to scorn, is dignified toil. They don't earn cents for themselves and dollars for massa. Theirs is the soil and theirs the return. But to answer your question, I say, no, comrade, no. You run to your mammon. Go, comrade, go. Be a second-class citizen, shoveling snow. It's better, my cold-hearted friend, that you do, because there's no place in Guyana for one who would rather turn to a whore, turn his back on his mother."
Thank you for that, John.
I got into trouble for that. By the time the Chinese whispers happened, it was John Rice stand up at the meeting and he'd say, "All women are whores." That's Chinese whispers.
Tell us though, John. The reason I wanted you to read that really was because I know you'd been a member of the Creole writing group, and I wondered if you could just share with us who were the actual members of the writing group. I mean, it was a group founded by McAndrew.
You got Roy with you as one. You had Rudy Seymour. Nobody's mentioned Rudy Seymour. You remember Peter Palaver? I'm sure some of you do. He was a cartoonist. I'm sure that Colleen will have encountered him.
What did you say his surname was? Peter
Rudy Seymour, Seymour. He was the author of a cartoon serial called Peter Palaver.
Was he the donkey-headed man?
Who was a donkey? Yeah, and he wrote the telephone corner, the caller, which I'd published as a story. He cartoonized it. Anyhow, where were we? Talking
the members. We were talking about.
The Creole Writers Group, and the group, it was established by A.J. Seymour and Sheikh Sadiq. If you remember Sheikh Sadiq, he wrote Bundary Bay and a few other, and as I say, Roy will remember it well, I'm sure, because he was there. And Guyana Marketing Corporation came into it because each Wednesday at half an hour, at 6:30, they would have a short story time, and Roy used to read. No, who was it? No, stories. Sorry. Yeah, no. Colleen's husband. I'm an old man. I've forgotten his name.
That's okay. John, sorry, what period is this we're talking about?
Oh,
1970s.
1970s, yes, early 70s. Every half past 6 every week, you'd get it come on. This is the Guyana Marketing Corporation, dedicated to feeding the nation, and something or other like that. I'm sure Roy will remember it well. And yeah, sorry.
Is Roy still there?
I think Roy's still there.
Roy is still online. Yes. So you also members were it was you, Rudy Seymour, Sheikh Sadiq, yourself, obviously, McAndrew.
Yeah. Wordsworth was the ringleader. Yeah.
He was the ringleader. Okay.
And and that went on. He read a few more of mine in that last Aunt Mercy's Inheritance, and Webster's Gem. What the other one he wrote? Yeah, Dear Old Uncle Dick. Yeah, quite a few of them, and It had quite a following. Sorry? Chandrawati wasn't written. I wrote that for a different one. Yeah, those were the days.
Well, thank you for sharing that, John. I'm
Okay.
gonna
It's
I'm
a
gonna
pleasure.
now go back to, let me just see if I can remove the spotlight. Okay, so we're now with Stanley. Stanley, do you want to do the final song that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, I'll do that. Rudy Seymour was quite a character. There was only one other cartoonist before him who used to work for the Argosy in the 1940s during the war.
Stanley, the volume, I don't know if it's me, is the volume gone down, or maybe you need to speak closer to your microphone?
Your volume.
Your volume.
Volume?
Yeah, your voice is kind of lowered. I don't know if that's, you're not speaking into the microphone or...
No, it's Witchy Gunzu, you know the thing.
Oh, Witchy Gunzu, okay.
Witchy Gunzu operation, yeah.
Okay.
That's
Yeah, carry on. Sorry, you were telling us about Rudy.
Yeah, that's an African word for the complications of the things that those people who live across the water, the things that they make.
Yeah,
so
the
one word brings all of that together. Witchy Gunzu. Yeah.
Witchy Gunzu.
Yeah, Rudy Seymour was the second genuine cartoonist in the newspapers. And what is interesting about him was that he was used both by the PNC and by the PPP to throw slings at one another, you know, to throw things. I thought that, I mean, if there's anybody you can see who was walking on the fence, he was walking on the fence between the PPP and the PNC, and he survived. Sheikh Sadiq was a one-man printing operation. Sheikh Sadiq used to print poems and things from other people. And he used a small printing press called the Adana machine, which you had to set by hand, like a big printing press, but a little one set by hand. And so you had to set and print each sheet by itself. And that was Sheikh Sadiq, very dedicated to what he was doing. So before I do the last one, I would like to drink a toast to Wordsworth. I don't have my schnapp glasses because they're all on this construction of mine. But in its place, which is what I usually do, I use a wine glass. See? So I pour a shot into the wine glass, and I say to Wordsworth, to his friends and family, I wish you good luck and a proper existence when you leave this universe. So to Wordsworth. And then you follow with water.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing. I actually, when Wordsworth's mother died, the flat was empty, his brother Nigel had left as well. Wordsworth offered the flat to me to live in. And so I said, yes, I would do that. So then the night of the wake, I went to the wake and I was a little late. When I entered a little room in Albert Street, room filled with people, and then there were bottles falling down and glasses falling down. And I said, what's going on here? Who opened this bottle of rum? Did you pour a libation? And they said, no. I said, please do that immediately. So they poured the libation, and that was the end of the bottles falling down and the glasses, you know. So that tells you that there are several universes out there. We're only in one of them, you know. The next song is quite an interesting one. It's the This Time a Long Time, This Time a Long Time. And it's a beautiful song, and it has the East Indian rhythm as opposed to the African rhythm. So it is go this time a long time, this time a long time, this time like before time. This time a long time, this time a long time, this time like before time. Long time got them jug lamp, now we got them electric light. Long time got them jug lamp, now we got them electric light. This time a long time, this time a long time, this not like before time. This time a long time, this time a long time, this not like before time. Long time drive on donkey cart, now we got them DeSoto. Long time drive on donkey cart, now we got them DeSoto. Now that DeSoto tells you the time when that song was written, when those American cars came in and they were fashionable DeSoto. And Burnham, before while he was still a lawyer, politics, but he's a lawyer, he actually had a DeSoto motor car that he used to park opposite St. Stanislaus, where I used to teach, outside of the Chinese embassy. So one day, one of my friends came by with a camera, and I told him, take a photograph of me. So I borrowed a pair of dark glasses, and I posed outside alongside Burnham's DeSoto. So that song, This Time a Long Time, it also has resonances for us today. Because there are any number of us who remember things gone by, and we tend to deal in nostalgia. Nostalgia has its place, but we have to deal with what is going on in the present. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stanley. Oh my gosh, that was packed. That was packed with so much fascinating. I particularly like the Old Higue. I had no clue about that. Somebody else put in the chat actually about Massacuraman possibly being Massa was a cruel man, or Massa cruel man. That really, yeah, based on, like, you know, obviously the slave masters and their wickedness kind of thing. I thought that was really fascinating. I wanted to ask you, this is a question that's got nothing to do with this talk at all, but just when we're thinking about the etymology of things, I've always wanted to know the origins of the term married man pork. Why is the time called married man pork? Do you know?
I have no idea.
No idea. Well, anybody in the audience, if you know, you gotta let me know.
Colleen's illustration showed Massacuraman as if he was a creature of the forest.
Right.
But Massacuraman is actually a creature of the water. It's a water spirit.
Yes, he is. And he isn't a creature of the forest. He's a creature of the swamp, the kind of waterways. So where he's standing, it's actually where all the swampy water and other bits are hanging around.
And if you're not careful, you jump out of the trench and grab you by the feet and pull you
Only if you're in Warratilla Creek and you can stay there.
You have to be very careful in traveling in canoes on the river, because if you fall overboard, you disappear.
That's right.
Well, it was Massacuraman took you. So it's a creature of the water and not of not of the land.
That's right.
Yes, and the silk cotton tree really is not so much the Dutchman who should have been on. This is for Colleen. It's not so much a Dutchman who is under the silk cotton tree. It should have been the spirit of a slave, because during the revolution, 1763, and people were burying their silver and their gold. They buried it in between the roots of the silk cotton tree, and a slave was killed.
That's right.
So that the slave's spirit would be
guarding the stuff that was left behind. That's right.
By the Dutch. So that's the silk cotton thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, that's also in the, if people are following the book of Silk Cotton, I gave a breakdown about each one of the supernaturals that were reimagined, and also the story behind them. And it is exactly as Stanley has said. Yes, the Dutch plantation masters didn't just bring their slaves and hung them from the trees whenever they did something wrong. They actually would hide wealth under the silk cotton and would kill the person who dug the hole to bury their wealth in, so that A, he wouldn't be able to tell anyone, and B, his spirit would be considered the guardian of that particular
There's where you get the folk song from, Me Not Dead Yet.
Yeah. Me not dead yet, Bamba, me not dead.
Oh, pray for me, Father, pray for me.
There's Auntie Joyce.
Me not dead yet, but not told.
Me not dead yet, answer follow me. Yeah.
There's also the thing about the Bacco.
Yes.
We say but the Bacco really comes from the Portuguese word bacuva, meaning bananas, bacuva. And this thing about feeding the Bacco with milk and honey, it really stems from West Africa, where the people of the villages, they never like to venture into the forest because that was a dangerous place. So the people of the forest were really the Twa people, the Batwa, or the Twi people, Batwi or Batwa. And so there's a kind of a relationship between the two, where the people of the village, they would be planting their bananas and whatever. The people of the forest, they love the bananas. So what they would do is they would come to a particular banana tree, and they would leave under the banana tree, they would leave the products of the forest, like honey, which the people in the village couldn't get because they're not going to go into the forest looking for honey. So they would leave like honey and products of the forest under that particular tree. So whoever owned that tree would not touch the bananas, because they know those people from the forest, they also shoot poisoned arrows. So that was the origin of Bacco. Bacuva is the Portuguese word for bananas. My father used to say Bacuva, and I couldn't understand why he was saying that, but then eventually I learned that was a word for bananas. So that's the story of it. So in other words, in Guyana now, the thing is that if you feed the spirit, it will bring you whatever. So the thing has been sort of transliterated and put into a Guyanese context. But that is
in fact, Stanley, if I can just say, when I was living in Ghana, I lived in the Ashanti region, where the rainforest was, and there were certain days of the week you couldn't go. The basic arrangement they have now is that there's one day of the week where they won't go into the rainforest, so that the rainforest has peace and quiet when people aren't in there, so that the Bacco could just live in, not be disturbed. But they have, it's called a motia, and in Ghana it's a very little man, and his feet are turned backwards. Everything's back to front, basically. And then he could fly through the door. He could fly through your house. He could do whatever he wants to do, create all kinds of different havoc. But I love it because the traditions are still very much there amongst the people who are living within the rainforest. So I love the kind of differences between Ghana and how it's kind of morphed in its use and description in Guyana, but really interesting.
Yes. Because I think the thing that you have to remember is that Guyanese people we are really a descended people. We're coming from slavery, and especially African Guyanese, the descent, they are really the descendants of that, and oral storytelling comes with it. And I also think that over time, the stories change because of the environment that you're in, because a lot of it is either adapted to the current situation or is modified so that people can actually understand some of those things. Because for them, the further away the generation moves, the more removed they are from the root of what the stories were. And that is why one of the things why I say it's very important to preserve those stories, because as time goes on, I'm afraid that we will lose them even as they are now. And I don't, I'm sure Wordsworth McAndrew, when he set out, wanted to do some kind of preservation to things that I consider to be rare gems. Everyone has their own identity for that, and ours is just as valid as anyone else's.
What I love
is the bush die. Sorry to jump in like this while I remember. Okay. Bush die. The bush die in Guyana, the feet are backwards. And the bush die actually is the forest spirit who is trying to prevent you from finding the gold and the diamonds. So if you follow the footprints of the bush die, it will be leading you away from the diamond. So in your drawing, in your illustration, love illustration.
Yes, and also the
so that
also
have to change. That feet have to change backwards. And
I also have that in the sense that in another part of the Caribbean, their feet being turned backwards were the feet of the children who were called Doen.
Yes, that's Trinidad.
So they're a different set of species altogether. As I understand the Bush Dai as well, she was also in the habit of appearing to pork knockers, as well as mining camp individuals, as a beautiful woman who would try her best to lure them
away from the goal, yeah. But all of this comes under what the university people call the African retentions. And so those retentions have been transformed or creolized, if you want to use another word. But the spirit of the thing is still with us. And that I think is what has to be recognized and what you're trying to do in your work. So congratulations.
But I like that so many people today in Guyana still kind of ascribe to these stories and tell you modern versions or encounters that they have themselves with it. So I see that Nicole Cole has actually put a comment in the chat saying that she says, my brothers and I had an encounter with Bacco on the shopping plaza in South Rumvelt Gardens. As children, when we were playing with a bottle, we ran and screamed after opening the bottle, having heard it say, "Thank you." Auntie Joyce, come in, please.
Yeah, because when we were children, there was something called these two Baccos. Somebody had them in a bottle, and when they opened in one was called Boise and Boyer. And they would embarrass you because they would rob some, if there was some uppity person, they would embarrass that uppity person by telling their secrets. And then this interesting about tobacco, I don't know where it came from the Dutch, because people would say you were going to Suriname to buy a Bacco and bring it back. This is how it changes. But now, could I change it to this matter of Old Higue? I don't know if you can see it, but I have a copy of the Old Higue that was published, and my friend Agnes Jones, she colored it. I wonder if I can show it to you, because it's very pretty. Look, is the Old Higue?
You would have to bring it much closer to the screen, Auntie Joyce, otherwise we couldn't see it. We can't see it from where you are.
Oh, dear. Well, one of these days when you come, I'll show it to you, because
when we come, we'll take a picture of it and share it on Guyana.
The plain one that was shown before, Agnes Jones colored it.
Is there somebody at the door, Rod? No.
Yes, you called them and they came, Juanita.
You know, something just knocked at the door. knock man at the door. I just wanted to find out if anybody had any particular questions. I know there's a lot of people online, and I wondered if particularly people like Barrington Brathwaite, I think I saw Harold Bascom was online. Does anybody want to contribute or even share their own stories or their own kind of contributions?
Can I just jump in there quickly while we're on this Bacco story?
Yes.
One of the things about Baccos was they're supposed to pelt your house if you don't feed them. That was taking the Bacco thing into another dimension, which is the dimension of the poltergeist, which is these malignant spirits. So that was a transference taking place there again, So that's the sort of the spectrum of the Bacco in Guyana, beliefs about the Bacco in Guyana. The ones who pelt your house because you feed them, and the ones you feed them with milk and bananas because you want to get stuff. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Can I make a contribution?
Yes, please, Harold, come in.
I have a collection.
Oh, sorry. Harold, I'm so sorry. I accidentally muted you. Please unmute yourself again.
Okay. I have a series of mythological figures, including the Bacco. So I don't know how do I show it? Point the screen, point it at the.
Yes, that's it. Just put it in front of the screen. We can see it. I feel like getting up and running away already.
All right. Now I have
that's the one I've seen. I can tell you, Harold, that your Bacco is famous because that's the one I see on Google when I Google Bacco.
A lot of people use my images without giving me any credits. No problem. It's a Guyanese thing.
No, the site I saw it on, they did mention your name, and I'm just gonna say it's famous because it's there.
The other day, somebody put my moon gazer on Facebook with no credits. No problem. I have an
Can I have a word?
I have an amusing
Bear with me
Bacco
1 minute,
story.
Aleph. Bear with me 1 minute. Harold?
Yeah.
Harold, can I just say, we haven't spoken before, but I'd love you to come on Guyana Speaks and share your work with us at
I
some
wouldn't mind.
You wouldn't
wouldn't
mind. Good. Well, if you could share your details with me in the chat and we'll get in touch. And then
Okay.
I think Aleph has a question or a comment. Aleph, did you want to come in? You're on mute though.
To Roy, that Burnham and Jagan were in the one party before the PNC was formed. Burnham and Jagan were together when they came to Guyana to change the system.
I think that was the point that Roy was making.
I thought he said, oh, I see. Okay, I'm sorry about what I thought. I didn't know if he knew that there was one party at one time.
Yes, no, that was
before
just
the split.
Correct. No, that was the point.
And you know, I was on the west coast of Demerara at the time as a schoolgirl campaigning for those people. So there you go. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that, Aleph.
On
Harold,
the issue,
sorry, did you finish saying what you
No,
wanted?
I need to share an amusing Bacco story.
Okay.
One day, I'm home, my phone rings, I'm in the bedroom. I'm in Georgia. The phone rings, the number is not familiar, it's a 347 number, New York. So I said, hello? The Indian boy said, are you the guy who sell the Bacco? I said, no, man, I don't sell them, I draw them. I said, Baccos are not real. He said, no, Bacco real. Me work in this New York, me work hard, me want one Bacco. So I had help trying to convince this guy that, man, this thing is not real, but he believed it. He's working hard in New York. Life is not so easy in America, so he want a Bacco for make ends meet. But my friend said, Harold, you're stupid, you know. You could have made some money, throw the money.
Right. Sell it, man. Sell the glasses. Double the price.
That's the
But
point
surely,
if you could
to
have
make a
found
long
it-
time ago when I said that Jumbies are now international. Okay.
Yeah.
All I can say is, Harold, sell that Bacco and I
Harold,
will.
if you could find the old Dutch bottles, find those old Dutch bottles and cork it, you're in big business.
Big business.
Yes.
But let me end by saying something about Jumbie.
Right.
When I lived in Guyana, there was this popular story of this lady coming home from church and she see a little bundle turn out to be a baby. And she picks up this baby, takes it home, and then this thing turned into a big Jumbie. Take me back where you picked me up from. Now, I took that story, and right now I am working on a graphic novel set in Georgia called Stray. What I am doing is taking myths from Guyana and internationalizing it, because the white folks are doing it to our own stuff. Why can't we take our own stuff and make fiction that may well sell internationally? And so I am working on this graphic novel called Stray, where there is a certain house by the sidewalk, out of which comes a demon that masquerades as pets. And when people take these pets home, they're found dead next morning. So at the end of the whole book, I'm going to have an origin story where I'm going to be giving credits to where it came from. And I'm excited about this project. Taking Guyanese myth, turning it into international fiction. And I think I'm onto something.
Well, Martin Carter would say, proceed. Don't talk about it anymore. Proceed.
No, I am working it.
Good.
I
but I
am
always understood that you had to go.
into it already.
Good.
I thought you had to go to Suriname to get a Bacco.
You can come to Florida and get one from me.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by all these different bits of information. I mean, if I ask everybody, I can get a list. This is good news.
I mean,
By the
John,
way, here's a copy of an example of Rudy Seymour's work.
hang on a second. Let me just because you're not spotlighted.
There you go.
Hold on,
There you
hold
go.
on, John. And spotlight. There you go. Who's that? Rudy Seymour.
That's an example of Rudy Seymour when he and I cooperated in the 70s. And I think that came from New Nation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew Rudy well.
Yeah.
John, that one character, Peter Palava, I remember him many years ago in Guyana because he was a character, he was the donkey-headed man that was always scripted.
Yes,
and my grandmother always used to tell, don't make yourself like Peter Palava. So I think I know he's not mentioned much, but I do recall Peter Palava.
Well, I don't know if anybody's got any other questions.
Yes,
Anyone or
Rosie can't get away without telling us a little bit about your wedding on the bicycle. I'm just imagining you going down the street with Wordsworth on the crossbar. Just elaborate a little bit about that.
The word is towing.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry.
Fine.
The word to carry someone on a crossbar in Guyana is towing them.
Towing. I know, but I'm breaking it down for people here that might not understand. Go ahead, Rosie.
Okay, so he picked me up. I was still living at his mother had come back by then. I was living at his mother's house. He was in what was going to be a flat in Kitty, Station Street. And he came and picked me up. I was wearing my little wedding dress, which was short and frilly and white. And he was wearing a dashiki, which I'd made for him on the model of the blue one that he was wearing in the picture I showed you at the beginning. So I'd made one in a sort of stripy fabric, and he picked me up and I sat on the crossbar and we cycled to the Universal Church of Scientific Truth in, I think it was in Hadfield.
Okay. And did you leave on that same bicycle?
I mean,
Did you all
just
depart
him,
on?
Rudy David. Sorry?
Did you depart on the bike as well? That's what.
Oh, yes, we did. But the trouble was that somebody living very near, just across the road from the church, it didn't look like a church, it just looked like a little house, saw us turn up. Oh. So when Mac got to work, because this was early in the morning, about 7 o'clock in the morning, because he didn't want people to see us or know what was going on. When he got to work, everybody knew, because this was a woman who worked at GBS. So I didn't see him again until several hours later when he came home absolutely blotto. I mean, I don't remember the Guyanese word for that. Anyway, completely drunk out of his head. So it wasn't really a very good day for me. And I must tell you, which is in the book, but I must tell you that the man who was running it, the pastor, he made me go back to the beginning. I was in the service, I was saying what I was saying, making my vows, and I was smiling because I was smiling at Mac. I mean, aren't you supposed to be happy on your wedding day? So I was smiling at him, and he said, now look, Rosie, this is a serious occasion. It's not to be laughed at. So you're going to have to go back to the beginning and start again. So I felt absolutely, I was humiliated, I was furious, and I felt completely helpless and pathetic. But I had to go back to the beginning. Now, Mac didn't say anything, and I think he should have stopped the man and said, now look here, this is my wife, you're not going to treat her like this. But I had to go back to the beginning. And at the end, I said to him, Mac, and I was crying by the end. And I said to Mac, why didn't you say anything? He said, well, I thought you must be missing your mother. So, I mean, that just showed really we were not completely on the same wavelength from the very beginning. Now, that's rather sad because, I mean, we had good times as well. But since you asked me about the wedding, you asked me about the bicycle. But for me, just as important was this bloody man. And the thing was, we'd been to see him 2 or 3 times before the wedding. And he told us how much he loved Gilbert and Sullivan. He went raving on and on about Gilbert and Sullivan. Now, if he loved Gilbert and Sullivan so much, he shouldn't have been, I'm sure he was just anti-white. I can't see any other reason for it. He wanted to prove his point that there's this little white girl getting married to a Guyanese. He's going to put her in her place. That's how I felt. So anyway, there's your story.
Okay, thank you. And I take it there was no honeymoon.
Honeymoon? No, we went back to his little flat and slept on a camp bed because we didn't have a proper bed. the two of
Okay.
us on a little tiny camp bed. And the day before, I was teaching at St. Joseph's High School by then, and I got utterly sunburnt because it was a sports day and my whole skin was kind of red. So it wasn't the greatest beginning. And we did have what was called a honeymoon, which was a trip to Ebini. And you were talking about the way Guyanese say certain words and the changing of the words and how people hear things and what they think they hear. We went in a twin otter, which at that time was called, as you probably know, a twin hatter. That's what they used to call this plane. And we flew out to Ebini, which is a cattle ranch. And somebody asked me if I'd like to ride on a horse. Now, I'd never ridden on a horse. So I thought, oh, I'd love to do this. So I got on this horse, which raced away with me. I mean, I don't ride. And I was terrified. And the other thing was that he spent most of the time drinking with the people we were staying with. Stanley, I love your stories about your drinking and everything. But as you know, I'm not a drinker myself. And I did not keep up with the drinking.
Okay, thank you for that, Rosie.
Okay. I would love to sing you a little song, a little folk song, since we've had some folk songs. And we've talked about, somebody mentioned that they were a little bit lascivious, some of them. Anyway, this is one I used to like. I'm sorry, I started a bit too high. I can't pitch it. Your man come home. Me been a chamber window, me hear the bird cry, quick, 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 quick. So that was the song that I the nice lascivious.
Yeah.
Sorry about the pitching, I couldn't pitch it.
No, so I actually find it really interesting, this whole thing of how free Guyana was at some point to, like just how raw, in a sense, people were in terms of the things they said and how comfortable they were. And it's reminding me, I had a conversation with Joan Cambridge just a couple of days ago, maybe even last night. And she was saying, she was talking about a character in Guyana who I've always known as Walker the British. And I think many of you will remember him. But she was saying she could remember as a child the way they used to shout at him as they would, they'd come out of school and they'd see him along the road. And because he was always chanting something about the British, they used to call him Walker the N-word. And of course, Joan just said to me, oh, the man called Walker the... And I was like, what? I was so shocked. But essentially, people in the diaspora, I guess, have just sanitized the description of him by now calling him Walker the British, because that's what he was always talking about. But yeah, exactly. Auntie Joyce has said it for me.
He used to walk about saying, he used to walk about saying British man forever. British man.
That's right, yes.
And he also had a brick in his hand.
Yeah.
And if you call him Walker the N, he's gonna throw that stone at you.
Yeah.
But he never actually did throw it, did he, Stanley?
Yes, he would throw that stone at you, but eventually he ended up at the Palms. And so he dressed very neatly. But I was always amused because he no longer had a brick or a stone that he picked up from the road, but he actually had a very elegant brick in his hand, a red brick in his hand, and he'd be walking down brick down. So I used to look at him from nobody troubled him then. He just walked with this stone in his hand because nobody knew him then. He had been in the Palms for so long, he was off of the streets. Yeah.
I see. But it's interesting how these kind of madmen, they look threatening, but they never do anything. Because when Rod and I were in Guyana recently, we noticed that like the electricity pylons were decorated with Christmas decorations, and then there were trees covered with upside down plastic cups and shoes hanging from bits of tree and stuff. And I was asking the taxi driver, like, what on earth is going on? Like, Christmas has come early to Guyana or what? And he said, no, that's Father Christmas. And apparently there's a man dressed up as Father Christmas who's cycling around, and he's got a cutlass in one hand and he's smoking a spliff in the other. And, no one is to disturb him while he's basically repurposing all the rubbish in Georgetown and decorating different parts, which I just love. Those are so brilliant.
Roy,
were you saying something?
The so-called the so-called mad people lived openly in the streets. Nobody
Yes.
there with that. But there's one particular fellow who used to be around the post office on Fogarty's.
Yeah.
I avoided him because he would be walking along, had a cap on his head, short trousers, and anything that he picked up, a stone, a stick of water, he would just fling it. You know, not at any particular, but just fling it. So it's a random projectile coming at you.
Yeah.
You know, people.
Stanley.
Thanks for that, Stanley. I wanted to bring Roy in if I can.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
I just wish to make a last point here. Since this name Rudy Seymour came up a lot. Now, Rudy Seymour and someone named Damon used to produce a comic strip in the Chronicle. I think it was called The Preacher. I want people to know that the Damon person who wrote the story was Mac. Rudy was the graphic artist, but Mac was the writer of that story. He used that name Damon on a number of occasions. Just clarify.
Thank you for that.
For those
Roy.
who didn't know, yes.
Thank you. I'm just conscious that time, it's now, well, it's 6:30 here in the UK, and I'm sure many of you will either be thinking about your lunch or thinking about dinner. I'm not sure which, but I just wanted, before, we can stay on a little longer, but I just thought for the time being, just in case the speakers wanted to depart or exit, can we just put our hands together and just say thank you so much to everyone for their amazing contributions. Really appreciate it. Brilliant. Thank you, Stanley. Thank you, Rosie, Roy,
that's
John.
The Preacher. That's a painting I did called The Preacher.
The Preacher?
Yeah, The Preacher.
Yes, I've seen that one.
Yeah, it's in a national collection.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. You're welcome to. I'll probably be here like for another 5 minutes or so if people want to stay on a bit longer. Otherwise, yeah, we're ready to go. Thank you, Colleen, as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you to
And,
everybody.
yeah, as I say, we're rooting for you. Can't wait for the comic to come out. Wonderful
Thank
to
you.
see Ken Corsby online with his wonderful wife Elizabeth. Hi, hello. And Harold, please, we have to have you on.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll get in touch with you via whoever knows you on here. Maybe Errol will put me in touch with you. Errol Brewster, you have his details?
Not sure I have his email.
Who has them?
Roy Brummell.
Oh, Roy, you put me in touch. That's good. Okay, I'll go to Roy. But yeah, and anybody else who I should be inviting. I was thinking I ought to invite Margaret Lawrence as well, and I don't know if Margaret is online, just to talk about your time at the Guyana Broadcasting Corporation and your acting background. I know would be of a lot of interest. So anyway, you're all amazing. So whoever wants to come on Guyana Speaks, let me know about yourselves, and we can schedule a program. I think we've only got one other program. What have we got? October, November. Rod, what's happening in November? You still organizing something?
Yeah, it's still in
it's in embryo
development. Still in development.
It's in embryo stage. Okay, so
yeah,
I can't say anything about
The-
that. But
no.
but yeah, I've got to start thinking about planning for next year. And so yeah, if anybody's got any suggestions, please do let me know. You know that you can always get hold of us at guyanaspeaks@gmail.com.
Yeah, and anyone interested in the Best of Guyana Tour 2023, just drop me a line, please. And yeah, Border Bazaar is on the Saturday the 10th. Saturday the 10th of December.
Okay. Of December, Rod, December. Stop saying September.
No, December. It's in time for Christmas, you see. And it will be in Collier's Wood. It will be in Collier's Wood.
Ah, right.
All right, that's good. Unless anybody, Aleph, you had your hand up? You want to unmute?
Speaker.
Yeah.
Because I sang Pepper Sassuman, walking along with the Kanja Bachelor. Yeah, what a shame. She is what a name. Pepper sauce woman walking along with the country bachelor. I won't do that again.
I love that. I want to hear more,
good
Bailiff.
next time. And that was regular because you even sang it for little girls who were a bit pompous. If you're a bit pompous, she isn't Pepper Sasso, man.
I was saying that you were not allowed to sing.
I wasn't, but I thought it brought me home.
You're not allowed to sing that.
Well,
we sang
my
it
grandmother, you come up. You weren't living on the West Coast, them Arara, but all them little girl was Pepper Sasso, man. So thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for the program. Thank you. So I lived that time, that space, that era, that mood. I thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Can I just remind everybody that they can get, if they want to hear more about Wordsworth, you can get copies of this on Amazon. And also, I think, Rosie, you probably put in a link to your book as well. Where did I just, look at this, Jumbie already stolen the book.
I put a link.
Okay.
But you've got the link to your book in the chat.
I only remember about 5 minutes ago, so it's towards the end.
Yeah, Wordsworth's White Wife is the title, and it's on Amazon. So that's that.
Thank you.
Roy, roughly when is the second volume? Do you know roughly a year from now, or?
No, not a year. I think maybe around February of next year. I'm just trying to clarify some things.
Okay.
And I'm waiting to see whether anybody else will surprise me with a McAndrew piece from somewhere.
Well, that's a shout out to everybody here.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Errol, you're sitting there very quietly, and I'm not used to you being quiet. What's happening?
I wanted to tell.
He was quiet. He was picking on me.
I wanted to ask Stanley to tell us about Law and Order, our first installation artist.
Law and Order.
Law and Order, yes.
Oh, Law and Order.
Remember Law and Order, Stanley?
Law and Order.
Had a big contraption.
Law and Order.
Hang people and dispense justice to the unjust.
Law and Order, as far as I'm concerned, apart from Philip Moore, was Guyana's #1 performance artist.
That's what I'm telling you. He was our first installation artist.
Law and Order.
And he was reincarnated as Errol Brewster, right?
Right.
Law and Order. Yeah.
Nice to see you, Harold.
Good. Great to see you too, bro.
I'd like to get back in touch with you, man.
All right.
You must send me your email.
Good.
Okay.
Well, that's
I'm at Errol
anybody else want to get in touch with anybody else?
Well, okay. I just wanted to say thank you very much, Juanita and Rod, for this, and thank you to my fellow speakers. I learned a lot of useful and great and amazing information, and I'm going to close now by saying, don't let John behold you.
Don't let John behold you.
Don't let John behold you, indeed.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Colleen. Take care.
Don't let Jumbie choke you. Choke.
Don't let John even more. Carl, you're sitting there quiet too, Mr. Brown.
Well, I've been listening, I've been reminiscing, and I'm thinking of people like El Cid and, mentioning all
you knew El Cid as well?
Oh, yeah, he sang a song called Local Dish. I love a local dish. I love a local ham.
That's right.
He came out, well, you must agree, I love my pepper pot and my metaji. He was really one of the good calypsonians, of the time.
Yep.
I was really listening back, and bringing back all the things, especially the taipi, the totilotipo, and the
Typhosius
charangi,
ricketix.
the things like that, and yeah, ricketix.
What is that, Greer?
Typhosius ricketix.
Typhosius ricketix.
Yeah,
Tarenge.
those are, it's really, really good memory. I think we should have a part 2 of this again.
We definitely need a part 2. That's why
Reliving Guyanese
maybe if we could
folklore.
get Barrington and
Reliving Guyanese
Harold
folklore. It's
and
very
I don't know, a
important
few other people
and
be really
edifying as well. You know, I think we need to. This is one way I sometimes ask myself, because we've got such good Creole, our dialects are really good. Why do we have to go full Jamaican all the time? You know, we go to Guyana, everybody's Jamaican, sort of. Why not? Oh, we talk we own thing. You know, we could always, as you know, you got all our dialects. So why we don't have it? Let's emphasize it more.
Absolutely.
I'm all
I agree.
for that. I'm all for that. I'm all for that.
You know,
that's good.
Well, in the 70s, you had the linguistics people in Guyana. You had a number of linguistics people who were actually researching that kind of material. But that kind of material never entered into the general dialogue.
Yeah, right.
There are a number of them. Forgetting the names now. Memory for names.
Wilkinson.
Yes.
We used to have people like Auntie Comsey, Pauline coming.
Yeah.
How are we,
Pauline
family? Are we
Thomas.
there? How are we do? That was on the air. That was really part of our dialect, or you know, our language.
Yeah. Margaret Kelman does that too.
Maggie
That
still
is
does,
why
yeah, which is good. You
I
know?
wrote and illustrated a book called 101 Words to Tell Your Guyanese.
Wonderful book.
Let's have a look. 101 words to what?
Tell your Guyanese.
Tell your Guyanese.
How do I get hold of
Get a copy of that then. Is it on Amazon?
Well, you got to get it from me, unfortunately. I mean, I got a few copies left.
Oh, well, then put my name on one, please.
All right.
and let me know how much I owe you. I'll see if I can get one of Colleen's Bacco. See how Bacco seems to be a rich one.
Oh, yes.
Or some money from him.
No, this kind of program, this is very rich. This is a Guyanese rich program. This is where we promote Guyanese to the bone, you know. I agree with that. And we should follow up that a lot more often.
Yeah. I was wondering if John Rickford is online. John Rickford, I know, is
The old Argosy newspapers used to have a column written by Uncle Stapy. Which was written, It was written in dialect form, but he commented on what was going on in the society. That was in the old Argosy newspapers. Uncle Stapy. Yeah.
I always remember that Middleholzer wrote a Creole chip about a Bacco, and I think it was something to do with everybody used to say, Uncle John always used to say, oh, there was a Bacco in the house last night or something, but it was always, he used to be a port knocker or something, and then when he'd come home, there'd be all sorts of noises going on at night. And so when the neighbors were wondering what the noises were, he would always just say, oh, must be a Bacco.
Must be Bacco. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyhow, thank you, everyone. It's been
And
a
thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Can I
Thank you so much.
Good to see you, Auntie Joyce. Good to see everyone. As
But you know that list where Rosie was talking about Wordsworth giving all the list of when you're in love. It was Taipei and something else.
There's Taipei, Charangi, Totilotipo.
Charangi. As a Charangi, we used to say Jega Sekaha.
Okay.
You never heard that one? It was Taipei, Charangi, and Jega Sekaha.
Never heard that one.
What does Jega Sekaha mean? Huh? What does it mean?
Kabanks.
It used to be Taipei, Charangi, and I didn't know the others.
And there was Totilotipo.
Totilotipo, Typhosius ricketix.
I didn't know the other ones.
There's a list.
I've got the list in front of me.
I'm used to love this Jega Sekaha. Jega Sekaha.
Yes,
that's
not
the third one after after Charangi. That I don't know about any of the others.
I think there's one. The Charangi is the one that you kill.
Oh no,
Rosie, would you be able to take a photograph of that page and send it to me? I'd love to share it on Guyana Speaks because I just think it's just so entertaining. That has to be
Stages
shared.
of love.
And the other thing I was thinking, Stanley, is if you could share the you said you made corrections to the dictionary or something, the Caribbean dictionary.
I have 6 pages.
6
I can
pages?
send it to you.
You can
That would
send
be
me
great.
those?
I have 6 pages of comments.
Yeah.
That I forwarded to Dr. Alsop and he never responded.
Well, could you forward them to me and we could share them amongst the group?
Yeah,
You could find them. If you could find them.
I can find them because they're stuck in the pages of his dictionary, so they're right at hand.
Okay.
Well, I think we'd definitely like to hear them or read them, Mr. Greaves. So we'd appreciate it if you could share that.
No, I would gladly share the entire list with you.
If you
Because
can,
Sounds
that
good.
would be
All
fantastic.
right.
when somebody like Alsop doesn't know that you do not make furniture out of green heart.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the houses with the green is crabwood or crabwood.
There are all kinds of woods. There are any number of woods that you make.
It's green heart is houses.
No.
There are all kinds of woods that were used in Guyana for furniture making.
But not green heart.
Of course not. The important one was crabwood, which is actually called, it's internationally, it is known as bastard mahogany. Because it is not a true mahogany. Because the leaves of the mahogany tree are totally different to the leaves of the Guyana crabwood tree. I never found out why it's called crabwood.
Anyway, people, bootlegger bracing me, I'm gone.
You're gone. We're all gone. We're all gone.
Bootlegger.
You're gone?
We're all gone.
Bootlegger.
So would it be possible for Mr. Greaves to send that to the list or?
No, I can send it to the list and I can also just put it, if it's not too cumbersome, I can put it on the Guyana Speaks Facebook page, but
sure.
But I'll see what we can do. And then also if Rosie sends it through, I'll share it with everyone anyway. That's been today. So.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right, everyone.
Just before you
Thanks.
go, can I ask Roy?
Nice one.
Thanks, Roy.
Bye. Thank you.